All right. Good evening. Welcome to the San Bruno City Council regular meeting of June 22nd, 2021. Call the meeting to order. And City Clerk, we may have roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina.
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Here. And I hadn't planned on this, but may I have a volunteer for my colleagues to lead us in the pledge, please? Thank you, Vice Mayor. I appreciate it.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I appreciate that, Vice Mayor. Now we're going to move on to item number 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. Individuals will be allowed up to 3 minutes. It is council policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. If there's any members of the public, if you could raise your hand at this time, and we will have the city bring you in. Again, this is for items not on tonight's council agenda. I'm gonna have a last call for comments, public comments. Hearing and seeing none, and City Clerk can stop me, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next item, which is item number 4, announcements and presentations. Item A, receive presentation from the police chief regarding 4th of July safety. Chief Johansson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, trying to get unmuted while switching over to my PowerPoint, so it always takes a minute here.
No problem.
Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Good evening to you as well as members of the public who are watching at home. My name is Ryan Johansson. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of San Bruno. And tonight I'll be joined by my colleague, Fire Chief Ari DeLay, in just giving a brief recap of the presentation we actually gave in the previous regular council meeting on June 8th, touching upon the 4th of July operations that are being conducted by the fire and police departments in an effort to keep the city safe through the 4th of July holiday. Actually, I will transition here to the first slide and turn it over to Fire Chief DeLay, who's got the first couple of slides.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Ari DeLay, Fire Chief. So for the 4th of July celebration and season there, we're going to have an extra engine company on duty for the day of the 4th. We're going to utilize the Type 6 Cal OES light brush truck to provide that service. We're again going to have all of our fire prevention staff on duty, and we've developed a joint fire and police public service announcement highlighting some of the important safety tips for the 4th of July holidays. And then just to recap, we've had a mandatory meeting with all this safety meeting with all the booth operators that sell fireworks here in the city of San Bruno. So those have taken place already. If we can move right along. From a safety perspective, for safe and sane fireworks, we must have a state fire marshal's tag on the safe and sane fireworks. That's just a great way to understand which ones are legal and which ones are not, and which ones are also most importantly safe for you and your family. We want to utilize fireworks at least a minimum of 10 feet away from any structures. We don't want to use it near any flammable materials, specifically grass and brush throughout our community. And it's always important to keep an extinguisher or a hose present or close by so we can go ahead and extinguish a fire if it did get out of hand at all by the residents. And we've had a few fires in the past that I recapped last time, but disposing improperly of fireworks, even if they are safe and sane fireworks, in a non-flammable container with a cover on it is very important. We've had some instances where they've been disposed of improperly, and they've started fires in garbage trash cans and also a couple of structures in the previous years. And with that, I think it's back over to Chief Johansson.
Thanks, Chief DeLay. As mentioned, this is all material we covered on the 8th, so I'll be pretty quick in describing the police's response to the 4th of July. specifically our add-ons to our normal staffing and police services. Every 4th of July, we conduct a pretty robust outreach and communication effort to make sure the public is educated about the different laws pertaining to safe, insane, and illegal fireworks use. We also take on the initiative of getting out into the community before the 4th of July and trying to establish preventative contact with previous individuals who've been cited or problem residences where we've had illegal fireworks use in the past. It's a list we maintain year over year, and we always make the effort to get out ahead and just kind of ask for compliance ahead of the 4th of July itself. We do conduct some enforcement details on an overtime basis before the 4th of July. This puts unmarked police units and marked police units out into the community canvassing for illegal fireworks use, and they will issue the $1,000 citations we'll be talking about in a moment prior to the 4th of July as well if they on view any sort of violations. Additionally, all of our staff is ordered into work the 4th of July, from dispatch to clerical staff, CSOs, and every single police officer, including myself, will be on duty on the 4th of July. And we'll be utilizing a variety of different techniques and tactics in an effort to keep the community safe, including the use of marked and unmarked units, bicycles, surveillance units, and all sorts of other tactics year to year. In terms of that enforcement, it's important to understand that safe and sane fireworks are permitted for use within the city of San Bruno as a matter of ballot measure, starting on June 28th from noon to 9 p.m. and on the 4th of July from noon until 11 p.m. These are the only times during which safe and sane fireworks, legal fireworks with the seal that the fire chief previously showed you, can be used. If you use fireworks outside of this time frame or in an illegal manner, you can be subject to the same $1,000 fine, which we'll talk about momentarily. Safe and sane fireworks are to be used on private property only and must be at least 10 feet away from any structures. They are not permitted for use in any public parks, public parking lots, on any school properties, or in any open space areas. And any misuse of safe and sane fireworks is not only dangerous and illegal, but can subject you to a $1,000 administrative fine. This $1,000 administrative citation is also issued for the use and or possession of illegal fireworks. And this can include what we call social host citations, which means that if you are maintaining a gathering on the 4th of July where illegal fireworks are being used, you are responsible for ensuring that that stops. And if you do not, as the person in control of that social gathering, you can be issued a $1,000 administrative citation, whether or not you are actually lighting or possessing the fireworks that are illegal yourself. We do need the public's help, as we do on every 4th of July, but primarily where we need that is in compliance. We are not able to be omnipresent, and so the only way to make the 4th of July truly safe and beneficial for all that are participating is to have the discipline not to use illegal fireworks, to only properly use safe and sane, and to encourage people you are gathering with and neighbors and friends and family to do the same. What we do not need is a lot of calls to the 911 or even the non-emergency line at the police department reporting illegal fireworks violations, unless that report comes with a very specific description of the location and the individual who is using the illegal fireworks. We are far more effective not sort of chasing our tails around town at the report that, oh, on my street there are aerial fireworks going off. We're aware of the fact that they're going off everywhere, and the burden of responding to those hundreds of calls often distracts us from the somewhat timely and challenging task of actually locating violators and issuing citations that hopefully make a difference year over year. So please do call the police department, do call 911 if you have an emergency, but if it's just to report there are illegal fireworks in a vicinity, please do not call with that. We simply do not have the resources to manage that on the 4th of July. So with that, thank you very much for giving us a few moments to recap our 4th of July operations, and I know that the fire chief and I are happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you to both chiefs. Appreciate your presentation. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none at this time, and seeing nobody else from the public raising hands. Again, thanks to both chiefs. Appreciate it. And we will go ahead and then proceed on to item 5, which is our consent for this evening. Consent calendar. All items are considered routine or implemented in earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested. So is there any item that my colleagues want to have pulled for a separate vote? Separate vote. Okay, seeing none for the separate vote. Colleagues, those that you'd like to have comments or questions. The Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Medina. Just a brief update from staff on items F as in Frank, G as in George, and J as in Jersey.
Thank you. Are there any other items, colleagues? Okay. If not, why don't we take them in order? Item F as in Frank, adopt resolution approving the design, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with Golden Gate Construction, Inc. for the San Bruno Avenue, Ferry Avenue intersection improvement project in the amount of $339,139, authorizing the city manager to amend the agreement with DKS Associates for $28,570 for a total agreement in the amount of not to exceed $88,048, approving a construction contingency of $55,000, approving a total budget in the amount of $602,000, and authorizing the return of $470,000 in project budget to Measure A fund balance. Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Medina. I did mention to the city manager of my intent to pull this item, and I think it's pretty important with the history there and the importance to our community to have a brief discussion on this project, and that's why I'm pulling it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. City Manager.
Sure. Staff is prepared to provide a brief presentation, and so I'll turn it over to our Interim Public Works Director, Haywan Ritchie, to articulate the item that's before you and the project.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I have a brief presentation to share. Okay. The evening I have before you tonight is the award of the Cherry Avenue and San Bruno Avenue intersection improvements. So some background information on the project. This is a major intersection which is on San Bruno Avenue and Cherry Avenue, located between residential neighborhoods and commercial office area. On December 19th, 2016, there unfortunately was a fatal pedestrian hit and run collision, which occurred within the crosswalk. While it was determined that the design of the intersection itself was not responsible for the collision, an engineering study was conducted, which identified some improvements that could be made to the intersection to enhance operations. These improvements will be implemented with the Cherry Avenue, San Bruno Avenue intersection improvement project, which is before you this evening. So, brief information on the current operation. So currently there is a right turn only lane on southbound, sorry, will I toggle around here? On southbound Cherry Avenue onto westbound San Bruno Avenue. Note that right turns are currently allowed on red. We have a combined left turn and through lane from San Bruno Avenue that either continues in the southbound direction or onto eastbound San Bruno Avenue. Going northbound on Cherry, we have a apologies, just trying to. So there's a left turn movement from San Bruno Avenue is permissive. Vehicles making this movement must yield to everyone else, who would include oncoming through traffic, oncoming right turners, and pedestrians crossing San Bruno Avenue in the north-south direction. In the northbound direction, there's a left turn only lane from northbound Cherry onto westbound San Bruno Avenue. There is a left turn combined right turn and through lane on northbound Cherry Avenue that either continues northbound direction or onto eastbound San Bruno Avenue. Along San Bruno Avenue, both directions have 2 through lanes and a protected left turn only lane. Under the protected left turn lane, those vehicles have the right of way, while the left turn arrow So the proposed improvements include reconfiguring southbound Cherry Avenue by removing the combined left turn and through lane and providing a separate left lane for each individual movement. This is done by narrowing the median to create space for additional lane. The right turn only lane from San Bruno Avenue onto westbound San Bruno Avenue remains, but the project would add a no right turn on red blank out sign and an overlap phase. The overlap phase would allow southbound right turns to continue without stopping when the non-conflicting left turn from eastbound San Bruno Avenue is active, so pedestrians would not be crossing at that time. The project would add a flashing yellow arrows for the southbound and northbound Cherry Avenue left turn movements. These signal heads have been shown to significantly reduce collisions by better delineating that while left turn vehicles are permitted to enter the intersection, they must yield to oncoming traffic and pedestrians. Other major improvements include adding pedestrian lead intervals, which provide pedestrians the opportunity to enter the intersection a few seconds before vehicles are given the green light. This increases the visibility of pedestrians, improves the crossing. The median modifications also includes adding a pedestrian refuge island, shown here, as well as the separation of the left turn and the through lane. I will also note that the median narrowing on southbound Cherry will require the removal of 2 trees. So I did want to note that. So those are the highlights of the improvements themselves. Staff recommends that City Council adopt a resolution approving the design, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with Golden Bay Construction for the San Bruno Avenue, Cherry Avenue intersection improvements project in the amount of $339,139. Authorize the city manager to amend the agreement with DKS Associates for $28,570 for a total agreement in an amount not to exceed $88,048. Approve a construction contingency in the amount of $55,000, total budget in the amount of $602,000, and authorize the return of $470,000 in remaining project budget back to the Measure A fund balance because the project was adequately funded and then some by $470,000. So this concludes my presentation. I'm available and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we're going to go to colleagues if they have any questions. I know we have a member of the public. I will call on public at the end of all consent items. Vice Mayor Medina.
Thank you very much for that report. Construction is scheduled to start in a couple months and be completed by the end of the year. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Can you bring back up the schematic of the proposed or planned end state? I have just a quick question regarding: are there plans to do in some intersections? They have the dotted lines that kind of guide people through their turns. Painted on the ground, and I was wondering if this project includes that. Just because there's so many different lanes all coming in, that might be helpful. I didn't know if that was part of this. If that was part of the study.
I have the project manager as well as the consultant. If Melissa, if you could please allow them in. David Wong and David Mahama. David.
I do not see David Mahama in the room. I only see David Wong, so I've brought him in.
Thank you. David, would you be able to answer that question if that's part of the work?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's trying to start my video, but hi, good evening, members of the City Council. Yes, so there will be kind of the dotted lines that Councilmember Hamilton was asking about. That kind of does a little a curving. But that's for the direction along San Bruno Avenue.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to see this project finally getting close to the finish line. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands up, we will go ahead and move to item G. Adopt resolution approving the design authorization. The city manager executed a construction contract with NEMA Construction for the street light pole replacement project in the amount of $327,100. Approving a construction contingency of $49,065, appropriation of $9,875 from the Measure A fund balance, and approving a total budget in the amount of $408,875.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't hear, did you call me to start on this, or? So the reason why I pulled this item was to acknowledge the amount of work that needs to be done in San Bruno for some of the simple things that we take for granted of streetlights, and how in our city, because of its age, as we start replacing things, there's a substantial cost, and this is a second round that we've taken on replacing poles, and we're at approximately 10%, and according to staff, each of these poles takes around $10,000 to replace, and we still have a number of those still to do, which is 613. So we have millions of dollars in streetlight repair or replacement that needs to happen, and to not acknowledge that, I think, or to acknowledge it is important, that all these things have cost, and we're replacing 5%, and that's all we can do at the time, because revenues are tight. I don't know if the city manager or staff would like to add anything to that, but that's why I pulled it, to acknowledge this effort.
City manager?
Sure. Knowing that Councilmember Medina may have questions or want a desire for staff to make a brief presentation, we do have a brief presentation prepared. Should the City Council like to receive it?
Vice Mayor, do you want a whole presentation, or do you just want to comment?
If it's really brief and it's already been prepared, I apologize for speaking too much then, but I think it is important that we acknowledge the work that is necessary, and it's the basics. You know, streetlights, something we all take for granted. So I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
The city manager, is it brief?
Sure.
All right, let's proceed, please.
I could try to be briefer. Let's see. So I have apologize. I'm not sure if I'm showing the right screen. Okay, there we go. So the item before you tonight is the award of the street light pole project. Some project background. In 2016, the city completed a condition assessment of all 2,100 streetlight locations. 680 were identified as being needed to be replaced. There are many that are very old. Typical lifespan that's expected are 15 to 50 years. Some of it between are 80 to 100 years. The annual work plan was to replace the most deteriorated poles first, and where possible, group locations geographically and by pole to minimize construction costs. 36 poles have been replaced, as the Vice Mayor has mentioned, in the previous project. I would like to note that there are some figures that are corrected and shown on this figure. It does not affect the basis of award or the resolution or the recommendation, but I would like to provide just some brief information. The basis of award was the base bid and add alternates combined. That was about 25 poles. The lowest responsive bidder was NEMA Construction. There were additional pole alternates that were provided, B and C, and that's if we had favorable bids to be able to award those. And so the base bid in alternate A equaled $274,000, which is about $66,000 less than the engineer's estimate. Alternates B and C were roughly around the same, 26.5. Total award is $327,100 for 31 poles. Some pictures of existing poles. As you can tell, the steel ones are rusted, and there's some concrete ones as well. So staff recommends council adopt a resolution approving the design, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with NEMA Construction for the streetlight pole replacement project in the amount of $327,100, approve a construction contingency of $49,065, appropriate $9,875 in Measure A fund balance, and approve a total budget in the amount of $408,875. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Questions from colleagues? Councilmember Hamilton.
Just a quick question. My understanding is that some of these same poles sometimes are utilized when we have the small cell site requests from the telecommunications companies, and I was wondering if any of the older poles that are identified have also been ones that have been requested to be utilized by small cell sites, and or if that were to happen, do we check this list and replace the whole pole as part of that project?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Hamilton, for that question. We do require that prior to installation. There currently are no co-locations on streetlight poles. They're on joint poles that are owned by PG&E. So that has not occurred yet. Before that would occur, we would require that they analyze the structural integrity of the pole to confirm that it can maintain that load.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none, we'll move on to item J. J is adopt a resolution approving the design authorizing the city manager execute a construction contract with Safety Network Traffic Signs, Inc. for the 2021 traffic sign replacement project in the amount of $92,295. Ms. Mayor, please.
Mr. Mayor, does just checking if Director Ritchie has a presentation for that, and that would probably be brief. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and since they've gone through the time to prepare it, it's important that we listen. And of course, it's interim Director Ritchie, so we want to listen.
Oh, thank you so much. I do have a brief presentation to provide. Let's see. Okay. So good evening again. The item before you tonight, 5J, is the award of the traffic sign replacement project. Okay. In 2007, the FHWA established requirements for traffic sign legibility and retroflectivity. In 2017, staff completed a condition assessment, and the city's 4,900 approximately traffic signs with 2,470 about 55% needed to be replaced. The work plan included replacing signs based on safety category priorities, which are priority 1, stop, yield, all-way; priority 2, regulatory warning, school; speed limit, etc. Priority 3, street name and guide signs; priority 4, parking and custom signs. In 2019-20, over 728 priority 1 signs were replaced. So this has already occurred. This year's project includes, we'll focus primarily on the priority 2 sign location. So priority 1 signs were replaced. Now we're focusing on priority 2. This includes replacing 359 regulatory warning and school traffic signs, 83 traffic sign poles, and removing and installing 80 street name or other signs onto the new poles. Staff anticipates a 4-month installation schedule. Future years will replace and update the remaining priority 2, as well as priority 3 and 4 signs. So these are some examples of what a priority 2 sign looks like. Staff recommends that council adopt a resolution approving the design, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with Safety Network Traffic Signs, Inc. for the 2021 traffic sign replacement project in the amount of $92,295.
Thank you for your report. Comments or questions from colleagues? Vice Mayor?
Just a thank you for that. It's important work that I think it's important to share with our community. Thanks.
Okay, seeing none other, I'd like to at this time go to any comments on consent from the public. And City Clerk, if you can assist me and bring in the members.
Yes, we have Paul Wapensky.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the Cherry Avenue plan. I read the staff report and it says that one of the items that they're going to do with is to synchronize the stoplights. And I've talked to the Public Works before and also the Traffic and Safety Commission. But if you're going westbound on San Bruno Avenue and you want to make a left turn on the Cherry to get into Mills Park, that turn light doesn't synchronize with the rest of them. Sometimes you'll have to wait 2 cycles for it to turn green while all the other traffic gets to flow. So if they can fix that now, that'd be great. But when they do the project, please make sure that's part of it, because it's really frustrating to sit at that light for, sometimes 2 cycles and not get to turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments and bringing that to staff's attention and the TSPC. Thank you. Okay, with that, that concludes consent. We have items A through J. Is there any action from council?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion, Salazar, second, Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina.
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to item 6, public hearing. City Clerk?
Item 6A, hold a public hearing and adopt resolutions approving fiscal year 2021-22 operating and fiscal year 2021 through 26 capital improvement program budget, approving city appropriations GAN limit for fiscal year 2021-22, approving the cost recovery policy and updated user fee schedule for fiscal year 2021-22.
Turn it over at this time to the city manager to begin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Javon Grogan, City Manager. I'll be assisted in this presentation by our Finance Director, Chin Yu Sun. In addition, all of your department directors from every department are available. Some of them are with me in this room. We are not wearing masks because we are all fully vaccinated and compliant with the new OSHA requirements. So it's nice to be back to a little normal. Why don't we begin? As the City Council knows, this is the meeting where we have planned deliberations on the budget, and there are several action items before you tonight. And we have a presentation to go through a number of items, some of which you've seen before, some additional items related to decisions connected to both stormwater and the Measure G committee. As the council knows, we did have a meeting just prior to this where you did provide staff with direction to utilize ARPA funds for the $1 million stormwater deficit. And so that is within the presentation. For time efficiency's sake, we will skip over those slides because we had that discussion at the prior meeting and clear direction from the City Council. So our objective tonight is on the screen. It is to hold the public hearing and adopt a number of resolutions connected to the operating and capital budget for next fiscal year 21-22. As a reminder, we operate on a July 1 through June 30 fiscal year. And so this will take us through July 1, 2021 to June 30, 2022. to approve appropriations related to the city's GAN limit, as well as adopt changes to our master fee schedule for the coming year. Our agenda is as follows. There are a total of 13 sections on this presentation. We will talk about the general fund, enhancements. We will recap reserves quickly. We will talk about enterprise, internal service funds, our capital improvement program, Measure G, vehicles, GAN limit, user fee schedule, alternatives, the request to council, and then have questions and discussion. With a number of the items, there are decision points for council. We can pause should the city council want to have those discussions at that moment, or we can complete the entire presentation and go back to those sections. And why don't we begin? So as a city council and members of the public will recall, this is our fourth meeting to review the proposed budget. It began with our meeting on June 1st. We had a presentation of the overall budget and a number of questions from the city council. We then had our first budget hearing on June 8th and our second budget hearing the day after on June 9th. And we are here today for final deliberations and adoption. As a reminder, the city's overall budget is $193 million, all funds. That's all of our sewer, water, stormwater, city net, general fund, and all of our special revenue funds. So to provide programs and services to the citizens of San Bruno, the proposed budget envisions spending $193 million inclusive of operating and capital. The baseline budget includes 246 FTEs. Council knows that is less 24 positions that were either frozen or eliminated during the prior budget cycle due to COVID-19 and our need to trim the city's budget. There are 104 capital improvement projects, and the total general fund budget, which is our general checking account, is $51 million. This slide is a high-level summary of the 21-22 general fund revenues, expenditures, and transfers. So the projected beginning fund balance is $2.6 million. Revenues is just under $50 million at 49.7. Baseline expenditures of 50.9. That leaves a deficit of 1.2 million. With the ending fund transfer of 1.4, an ending fund balance of 1.4, with a transfer in for Measure G that is proposed that we'll talk about, that will be aligned to specific service categories of 0.6 or 600,000, with a projected ending fund balance of $2 million prior to the general fund enhancements that we'll talk about shortly. With regard to overall revenues and expenditures, I know the city council has seen this several times during our budget presentations. This is the exact same pie graph. Notable is when we look at our revenues, our property tax and sales tax together make it 45% of our baseline general fund revenues, 24% for property tax, 21% for sales tax. With regard to our expenditures, the largest share of our expenditures at 58% is for police and fire, our only two 24-hour operating departments. Now I'll turn it over to Chin-Yu Sun, our finance director, to take us through a few more slides with regard to general fund operations.
Thank you, Jawan. Honorable Mayor and members of council, Chin-Yu Sun, finance director. Here I would like to give you some revenue highlights. We talked about this before, and here just a reiteration. Our property tax is going to increase moderately with the housing market remaining pretty hot. Sales tax will increase by 11% when economic activity increase after the state fully opens. Of course, we have already fully opened since the 15th of June. DOT will increase by 72%, but still more than half behind the pre-COVID level. Vehicle license fee, which is biggest source spot will be 9% lower, as most schools are converting to basic schools. Thank you, Mayor, for issuing the letter to the state legislatures and the governor. Hopefully, the state will come up with additional funding to make us whole in the upcoming year. That will be a lifesaver for us if that happens. Next slide, please. Here is a look at the general fund revenue. You may have noticed that we made some modification adjustments to the proposed budget. So on the second column to the right, we titled the column called the amended proposed budget. We made some minor adjustment to the cost allocation and revenues. So you see some minor differences, but the total difference is not very substantial. With that adjustment, we're still seeing the total revenues for general fund for the next fiscal year is that it's almost $50.3 million. Slide, please. And for expenditures, we all know the pension cost is really a big factor for increasing costs, increasing expenditure in general fund. And another big increase are health and insurance costs. And all the union MOUs are subject to negotiation by the end of this calendar year. Under the city manager's guideline, we developed a status quo baseline budget, meaning the reduced staffing in the current year is not recovering in this baseline budget. There's a limited ability to enhance facility infrastructure maintenance. There still is a significant backlog of capital projects, and then we're not making any easy decisions in this meeting. And I do hope that the council will provide support for the staff and then for the city in our next year's operation. General fund expenditure, there's minor adjustment to the proposed budget as well. All in all, we're going to see the general fund expenditure still hover around $50.1 million. This is just a breakdown by departments. I'm not going through that one by one. Slide, please. Now we're talking about the general fund summaries. This tie back to one of the slides that I talked about. We are beginning with the general fund balance for the next fiscal year at $2.6 million. That's 2.573 on the top, and the operating revenues is about 50.3. That's including some fund transfers as well as such as the $600,000 transfer from Measure G. Total operating expenditures is going to be about $50.9 million. We're seeing a debt surplus. We're seeing a deficit about $600,000. But bear in mind that deficit will increase if we take the Measure G transfer out of it. So we're seeing an ending fund balance, which is a proposed budget at almost $2 million. Next slide, please. Here, we want to take a look at our general fund unrestricted reserve and comparing with our reserve policy target. General fund has a policy target of $1.5 million. With this proposed budget, we are going to see the balance at about $2 million before the enhancements. General fund reserve is about $12.3 million, which is slightly behind the 25% annual budget expenditures target. General fund capital reserve is exceeding the target of $5 million to be at $9.4 million, but 50% of $9.4 million is really designated for the RAC project. That's a U2 fund. Emergency disaster fund is slightly below the target of $2.7 million. All in all, our general fund unrestricted reserve is going to be about $26.3 million at the end of next fiscal year. Although we have 26 million unrestricted reserve, doesn't mean we have 26.3 million in the bank. We do have some significant deficit with enterprise funds. These enterprise deficit has to be covered by general fund unrestricted reserves. These deficits are sitting out of service funds at almost $14.5 million, and we also had talked about the stormwater is going to enter a $1 million deficit. So the subtotal of the general fund unrestricted reserve is just going to be about 10.7 million at the end of next fiscal year. Together with our equipment reserve, we have about the net reserve of 14.1 million. It's not substantial at this level at all. Next, I'll hand this back to Joanne. He's going to talk about our enhancement request.
Thank you, members of the council and the public. As we talk about enhancements, I wanted to begin with a slide that we talked about at our first budget meeting on June 1st. And so in the proposed budget, we included funding for a number of new city council strategic initiatives in the amount of $1.388 million, just under $1.4 million. And so they're listed up here above, and I'll run through these really quickly. There's a downtown streetscape implementation and architectural services for $300,000 that was proposed to be funded by Measure G. Upgrades to our Channel 1, wildfire mitigation and fire prevention of a total of $244,000. That was both staffing as well as $150,000 to do brush clearing this year. A new economic development manager position, conducting a water and sewer rate study, installation of beginning the process to examine and install downtown parking meters and wayfinding signage, adding an additional $75,000 to that budget. $70,000 for our affordable housing plan implementation, $60,000 for grant writing assistance, work to begin developing cannabis regulations of $40,000, funding to help supplement the budget to replace our newspaper racks, and enhance holiday decor of $25,000 for holiday decor at City Hall and downtown. And that's for the total of nearly 1.4. In addition, we recapped a number of city council strategic initiatives that were not included in the proposed budget. And for various reasons, we went through these in detail last time. If I point out a few, just with the east-west street sweeping alignment, it's important to note that with the unsuccessful storm drain and flood protection fee, costs to begin and undertake this effort are currently unknown. So the fund is currently $1 million in deficit. What we said last time is that we would need to fully analyze the cost to undertake this. It would significantly increase the workload for street sweeping and certainly have a cost implication that may be offset in the short term by revenue from fees. But what we know with street sweeping is that once people get a ticket a few times, they move the car. And so you don't fund street sweeping off of citation revenue. And so we knew that it would be an additional cost, but the cost is not identified yet. And without that revenue, we would need to look for other funding sources. Climate action plan, we're exploring a partnership with Skyline College. Citywide performance metrics, we mentioned that we would plan to issue an RFP and bring that proposal to council. Charter City, knowing that that's an initiative to work on, that coupled with the initiative of a transfer tax may be cost positive, but certainly the work would undertake a cost. We haven't identified those costs just yet, but we would return to council once those costs are known. Summer closures of downtown on Saturdays or Sundays, we were not able to identify or budget the cost for that. The Adopt a Dream program was a strategic initiative that we had, at the time of developing the budget, did not have a cost for. With regard to small business attraction, it's important to note that there is a proposal for, I believe, $112,000 that we'll be talking about shortly, and that was added during the proposed budget discussions with respect to a program that's being run by the Bay Area Entrepreneurship Center. But as far as enveloping a larger small business attraction program, there was a position, or there is a position recommendation for an economic development manager, and we were going to look to that manager to help us with developing that program, and then bring forward any financial recommendations. Funding for Posey Park, there's an estimate of $500,000. There has been a financial ask to Measure K for a portion of this money that we're waiting to hear back on. And of course, the community fiber agreement of $12.5 million that we do not have the resources to fund at this time. In addition, there are $540,000 of general fund enhancements that are included in the enhancement request. This $500,000, as the finance director mentioned, when you have a projected ending balance of $2 million, and you add this, we were projecting to end at the policy limit of 1.5 of fund balance. I won't go through all of these because I know we've talked about them several times, and we can return to any of these that council would like to address. But in the interest of time, I won't go through them all. There was a question, however, about the city manager's office professional services budget that we did clarify by email. So that 150 is made up of three components. It's funding for the cannabis initiative of $40,000, funding for the grant writer at $60,000, and an additional $50,000 for a general professional services budget in the city manager's office. And so I know the city council has received that. All of these others we've talked about, happy to return to in the interest of time. A number of them have one-time costs. Many of them are offset by additional revenue. And so the net impact is that $540,000 that you see in the bottom right-hand corner, which is shown on the first slide. With regard to proposed ARPA American Rescue Plan acquisition funding, so we again discussed this significantly during the budget cycle and our prior budget meetings. But these are the positions in the revisions to the proposed budget where the first direction from the city council was to reduce the Measure G positions. And so we added the three positions from the bottom up: the part-time services, the senior building inspector, and the executive assistant to the city manager's office from other sources to here. And then the senior planner, as we talked about at the last meeting, was an additional add during the budget cycle, given the level of workload that we are currently experiencing in the planning department. But the funding need for that position is only 25% because we, based on the current development pipeline and reimbursement agreements, we know that we can fund that position at 75% funded from developer reimbursements. And so that brings us to this slide, which presents the total of that ARPA funding as a glide path to restore a portion, but not all of the positions that were reduced in the prior budget cycle, and also having strategic additions tied to strategic initiatives and other items. And so in that second proposed column for 2021, it's the $112,000 that we mentioned for business grants on top of the $290 that the city council has already awarded in the current fiscal year. There's proposed CIP funding of $750,000 and position funding of 1.5 that, as a reminder, trails off by 25% each year. And so based on our regular revenue growth in the general fund, with the general fund picking up 25% of the cost of those positions each year, and by 26, having those positions fully covered in the general fund budget. And so out of the $10.2 million of ARPA funding, the proposed funding through 24-25 connected to these recommendations is $7,350,000, leaving just under $2.9 million. As a note, this does not include those 4 positions that were originally recommended to be funded by Measure G. As we talk about Measure G, we all know Measure G is our half-cent sales tax that next year is projected to bring in $3.5 million. There's the ballot language there for Measure G that I won't go through because we talked about it before, but know that all of the proposed budget recommendations align to language within that ballot measure. With regard to the Measure G funding, there are 3 columns here, and I want to pause here to have the finance director begin the articulation of Measure G and the Measure G funding recommendations and the meeting that we had with the Citizens Revenue Oversight Committee on Friday and their recommendations to council, and then we will continue with other discussions.
Thank you, Jerome. I'll just run through the progression of a Measure G proposed use throughout this budget development season. So Measure G, as we expected at the end of this fiscal year, is going to have $1.25 million in fund balance, which is much better than we had projected in the last budget season. We're going to expect that the revenue coming in for the next year is about $3.5 million. So that provides quite a bit of funding in Measure G for potential appropriation for the city's general uses or intended for the Measure G election ballot purposes. So originally in our first version proposed budget, the city manager proposed to fund $1.4 million street project with Measure G funding, and then $300,000 for street, and then $804,000 for positions, and $600,000 for transfer to general fund to help general fund achieve the fund balance target. And then there's another $240,000 for the payment trust. After discussion with the council during the study session on June 8th and then 9th, the council expressed concern of the Measure G funding for positions. So we moved some of the positions out of the Measure G funding, and you can see in the employee position line, it reduced from $804,000 to $517,000. Everything else remained the same, except for we believe the citywide fire mitigation is in the line with the spirit of Measure G election at the beginning. So we moved that $150,000 into the amended proposed budget after the discussion with the city council. Last Friday, we met with the Citizens Revenue Oversight Committee. The committee members felt that Measure G funding should be used for street projects. So they approved unanimously for the street project, CIP project 1.4. They also felt $150,000 for fire mitigation was appropriate usage of Measure G funding. And then they also allowed us to use the $240,000 for the payment truck. So that's the difference, the progress of the Measure G proposal in the budget season. As you can see, with the various different proposals, the ending balance of the Measure G is going to be well above $1 million. With the most right column, keep the most of the balance. If we're only allowed to follow the Citizens Revenue Oversight Committee's recommendation, the Measure G funding will have almost $3 million in fund balance at the next fiscal year. Max, did you want to talk about?
Let me expound upon the discussions at the Oversight Committee. and point out a couple things. It was nearly a 3-hour meeting and a very, very robust discussion. The committee really understood the challenges facing the city, I believe, but in light of the ARPA funding, really thought that before utilizing the funds as proposed, we should look towards ARPA. It's certainly connected to positions. In fact, the committee felt that it was not appropriate to use the funds for employee positions, even if there was a path to gradually progress off of that. In addition, we had discussions with the committee about potentially other things, road projects, but also other areas of the city that could use Measure G funding. And what we committed to them was the same thing we committed to the city council, is in all of these scenarios, there is additional Measure G fund balance to look for additional road projects first, where those funds could be applied should they be able to be executed, key point executed, in the next fiscal year, given the current capital program, which is a significant capital program. There may not be the ability to add on to some of our street projects, but we would certainly look to see if there was, because we know of the interest in improving our roads and doing it as fast. The other point that as fast as we can, the other point that I want to make to the city council is whether it's 1.5 or 2.9 left in ending fund balance. That should not be looked at as a bad thing. We know that slurry seal is the cheapest road treatment, but some of the more expensive road treatments, the reconstruction or the grind and overlay, cost several $1 million, even if you're only doing a few block segments. So to let a little money accumulate in Measure G so we can do larger projects is not necessarily a bad thing, but we know that there are a number of pressing needs, which is why the proposed budget was structured by the way it is. Certainly the committee recognized that the city council is sitting in a different seat and has a host of other things to consider, but they felt very strongly and comfortable with their recommendations as they decided it, and as it's presented in that final column. With regard to funding decisions related to Measure G and ARPA, we did want to call out 4 key ones based on where we are now. And it's essentially, let's consider these funding decisions related to new information. The first one certainly is stormwater that we've talked about, so we won't go over that. The next 3 are connected to the Citizens Revenue Oversight Committee recommendations, and then that's considering the proposed general fund funded employee positions, the transfer from the general fund or transfer from Measure G to the general fund to support public safety and parks maintenance services, and then funding for that downtown street plan implementation, a council strategic initiative. And so if we step through these really quickly, and we can absolutely return to them. With regard to number 1, funding the stormwater deficit, we talked at the prior meeting, and the city council provided direction to use ARPA funds. And so we will sort of go through the slides connected to that. Key point that if you do not fund the 4 positions, you have enough. And if you do fund the four positions that were due to be funded by Measure G, you have enough within ARPA to do both, to both fund the stormwater deficit for 1 year and those 4 positions on that 25-25-25 reduction plan to gradually allow the general fund to pick up the full cost of those positions. With regard to number 3, the transfer to the general fund to support essentially the baseline budget. And the city council articulated before to just not tie these expenditures to fund balance support or general blanket general fund support, but instead to articulate it for key items. And so staff did provide a subsequent information to council that's on this screen, which is sample allocations of $600,000. On average, a police officer is $150,000, as well as a firefighter. And so 2 police officers and 2 firefighters are $300,000 a piece, and that would cover that $600,000. or you could fund 1 police officer, 2 firefighters, 1 parks maintenance worker, and a portion of the parks maintenance operating supplies. But this is, again, sort of basic support, not additional enhancements, but basic support for the general fund baseline. And it's important to note that this allocation is really connected to COVID-19, or this proposed allocation is related to COVID-19 and the immediate financial impacts that COVID-19 had. And so what's on the bottom third of that screen is a summary of, in the current year, this current adopted budget, both the committee and the city council supported and adopted utilizing $2 million of Measure G funding to support the city's baseline budget to essentially prevent further reductions in services to the community. In the proposed budget, we were able to drop that from $2 million to $600,000. And so that's a $1.4 million reduction in just 1 year. And so when we talked to the committee about this, the committee understood this. But one of the things that was noted in the committee's discussions was that there was not a concrete plan that was articulated to reduce that last $600,000 down to zero to some time period. And so we did understand that and accept that constructive feedback. But at the end of the day, the committee thought that they did not want to recommend additions to the city council, but recognize that the city council has a host of other decisions and challenges with regard to the budget. And lastly, connected to this transfer, it is important. So the general fund projected ending fund balance with the Measure G transfer and the general fund enhancements is $1.5 million, which was targeted to meet the city's policy target. If you pull that general fund transfer out, the general fund projected ending fund balance will be $900,000, so lower than the policy target of $1.5 million. And so professionally from staff, I do believe, while I understand the committee's position, it is important that we end with that $1.5 million target. And so I would encourage the city council to think about allowing that transfer and having check-in points during the fiscal year with the hope that we'll not need it. Maybe we'll have additional revenue, but understanding that meeting those policy targets are critically important. The last item of the downtown streetscape plan, a council strategic initiative. And so our initial recommendation in the proposed budget was utilizing Measure G funds. Given other items and where the committee landed, I did want to proffer to the city council that one funding source is utilizing the city's general fund capital reserve and one-time initiatives fund that does have a projected ending fund balance of sort of a net of $5 million. And I called it a net of $5 million because that takes out that $4.5 million that, remember, is in that balance, but is planned to be used for the Recreation and Aquatic Center next fiscal year. And so really there's, with the RAC funding, there's $5 million available. So you could utilize $3 million or $300,000 from that fund to cover this. The challenge is that there are a lot of pressures on that fund and our capital reserve fund in general, which is why tied to Measure G, we thought it was appropriate. But that is certainly a decision for the city council in your final budget deliberations. And so that concludes those discussions on those items. Next, we have a few slides with regard to the enterprise, internal service, capital improvement program, equipment, GAN limit, and user fees. There's approximately 10 slides before the end of the presentation. My recommendation would be, I would turn it over to the finance director to complete those 10 slides. We'll complete the presentation and then engage in council questions on the presentation and the rest of our agenda as well as deliberations. So through the mayor, is that your pleasure?
Unless I'm seeing any nods of negative, I would say yes, proceed with the last 10. The GAN thing is pretty straightforward, and user fee we've gone over, but let's summarize it. So please proceed with the last 10 slides.
Perfect, thank you. Director?
Thank you, Jerome. Mayor and members of council, let me continue with the enterprise funds. As you all know, we have 4 enterprise funds in the city: water, wastewater, stormwater, city gas services. The water and wastewater funds are not going to see any rate increases for next year. That's a council decision to try to relieve some economic pressure on our residents. So, but both funds will stay healthy for the next fiscal year. But this picture may change with a long range view, which we talked in the earlier sessions. And then stormwater, we talked about, is going to see a $1 million deficit, and city net is going to see a 14.6 million deficit. Next slide, please. Next one is our internal service funds reserves. For internal service fund, we have a lofty goal of maintaining the 25% of annual budgeted expenditures for 3 of the funds, like central garage, building, facilities, and technology. I want to let you know, none of the fund is going to will be able to achieve that goal, actually. So our reserve for these funds at the end of 21-22, as a stated dollar amount, is between 15% to about 18% of the budget. But internal service fund usually have allocation from all departments to provide a funding source. We have gone through the proposed budget development. All the departments are really having a lot of pressure on the expenditure. It is hard for them to come up with additional money to support the internal service fund. So we take a decision to reduce the fund balance target to have at least at a 15%, but we're not able to achieve 25% of the internal service fund. That's a target. That's a hopeful, but that's not a minimum. Minimum we'll have our policy to have the minimum set at 15%. So all in all, the internal service fund at the end of next fiscal year will be having about 1.7 million. Proposed CIP budget, as we talked before, the CIP budget is going to support 104 capital projects. Almost 61 million is going to are carried over appropriations. The new request amounts about 25 and 5 million. And total CIP funding appropriation for the next fiscal year is $86.5 million. For the entire 5-year outlook, our CIP actually carried an entire budget of $23 million. And this is a list of equipment and vehicle purchase requests that we talked about during our discussion on June 9th. With the equipment replacement fund, we're hoping to purchase four police interceptors for $320,000, one Toyota Sienna minivan for $45,000, and one community service for $250 and $55. And also we're hoping to replace all the some police patrol rifles at $146,000, and then a command vehicle for fire department at $75,000. And then the pavement repair truck is $240,000, and this funding is coming from Measure G. And then additionally, there's a couple of equipment for community service, $15,000 for the John Deere mower, and then $8,000 for mower trailer. So all in all, we have equipment replacement about $189,000. Vehicle replacement of $420,000, and then there's some new requisition at $315,000. I believe the total adds up to closer to over $900,000. Next, we're going to talk about the GAN limit. GAN limit is a voter-approved initiative to limit the amount of tax-generated revenue based on the fiscal year 78 and 79 budget, adjusted each year with the cost of living and population growth. This cost of living and population growth are data published by the Department of Finance with the state of California. The adjusted 2021-22 appropriation for the city of San Bruno is well below the limit by 28%. Next, let's talk about the draft cost recovery policy. The council reviewed the draft cost recovery policy during the meeting on March 2nd, 2021. And this policy provides a framework for the city council to communicate to the public why fees have different cost recovery levels. Once this policy is established, it would be reviewed during the future user fee updates or when the city council believes review is necessary. And this policy will create some flexibility for staff to respond to unusual circumstances or unique opportunities in its pricing of services. The cost recovery policy has several levels. The full cost recovery or near full cost recovery, such as building permits, we are hoping to recover the cost at 80 to 100% level. The medium cost recovery is a 40 to 80% level, and the typical example is the middle school recreation programs. The low cost recovery is at a below 40% level. One good example is the senior launch program. The proposed user fees we talked about in the several study sessions, with the council's recommendation, we're making a series of updates and changes. So currently, the total number of fees are about 547, and there are 273 increase, the 10 was decrease, 88 new fees, and 121 fees will remain at the current level. There is some deposit based on cost recovery 2021. There is also 34 fees that varies depending on the cost recovery amount. My presentation.
Okay, so that takes us to our action items and Q&A. So the action items are to hold the public hearing and adopt resolutions approving the operating and capital program, approving the GAN limit, and improving the cost recovery policy and user fee schedule, all for the upcoming fiscal year. Alternatives are to amend the appropriation amounts contained within the proposed budget, or do not approve the proposed budget appropriations effective July 1. And in this case, we have prepared a continuing resolution. Should we go there, would recommend that the city council at a minimum adopt the capital improvement budget so we do not have delays with our RAC project and our other capital improvement projects. And alternative resolution is attached to this report. But we are here ready to support the city council through your discussions and deliberations. So again, I want to thank the council and the staff for the long process that took us to here. And again, all of your department directors are available virtually to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you very much to Director Sun and all in the finance department, the directors for all the time that goes into these budgets. I'm sure everybody looks forward to this time of the year, but I know it's daunting and it's a lot to deal with. So thank you very much. This is a public hearing. So what I'm going to do is open it up to members of the public that wish to speak at this time in case they wish to offer their comments, and then depart if they need to. So again, if you wish to speak on what you've just been presented, which are the three items, the GAN initiative, the master fee schedule, or the operations and capital improvement budget, you could raise your hand now, and City Clerk, if you'll bring in folks.
Yes, Paul Wapensky.
Good evening again. I got just a couple issues. First off, on the Measure G fund usage, when it first came out about this being on the ballot, it was to improve the roads with the caveat that, they could use it for other items. But if you go to the city's website and you look at Measure G priorities, not one of them says for personnel costs. And I'd just be careful, and my personal opinion is that we shouldn't use that for that. We should, if we're gonna have to hire people, we gotta take it from someplace else. That those funds should be used for what it was sold for us to use them for. My second thing is the city nets a $14 million deficit again. Is that ever going to turn a profit, or are we just going to throw money at that forever? And then during the briefing, the personnel costs that were cited, are those just salaries, or does that include the fully funded CalPERS contribution and also the medical and dental and all that stuff? And then my last comment is, you know, the staff and the city council uses the lexicon of city speak all the time, but we don't. There's a lot of acronyms being thrown out there, and I try to search for some of them, like the ARPR, and it doesn't come up with anything. So I don't know what that stands for, but it'd be helpful if you could spell those out, or at least have an acronym list that we could look through so that we could know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak on this item? Once we close public hearing, you won't be able to come back in, so now is your opportunity and the time. Seeing no other hands, do I have action from council to close public hearing?
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
A motion by Salazar, seconded by Hamilton to close public hearing. Let's just say, I think at this time I was told we can just do a roll call. I mean, we don't need a roll call. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. So I'm going to record that, and city clerk will record that as 5-0 in favor of closing public hearing. If I am incorrect in that statement, please correct me now. Okay, with that said, city manager, I have a comment, but or a thing. How best would it be to go through? That would be best, do you think, so we're not going back and forth, or is that how you prefer it? Because I can tell you we could probably take on the GAN limit real quick, and I bet you there wouldn't be any too many questions, and we all can have a win there. But what do you suggest, man?
Absolutely, you read my mind. I would suggest beginning from the user fee resolution and then the GAN limit. And I said user fees first because we do have consultants that are on board from Wildan, who produced the user fee study, as well as Craig Whittam, who has supported us through those discussions, just in case the city council has any questions. I know we had 2 study sessions on it, but if we want to take that item and then go to the GAN limit and then talk about the other items in the proposed budget, that would be the preferred order.
I would agree. Thank you for letting me know that we have people standing by. So let's go in that order. We'll go in reverse order. So the first one we will talk about is the approving the cost recovery policy and update user fee schedule for FY 21-22. So are there questions for the recovery policy and master fee schedule? So if you are there any questions from my colleagues? And now would be the time to ask the questions, since we have the folks available to answer. Okay, Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, what is the effective date?
The effective date is September 1st. That provides staff an opportunity to advise the public, get a new master fee schedule published.
And when we last spoke about this, we talked about a phase-in approach, and I just wanted to make sure, can we talk about that a little bit for those members of the public who are listening?
Yes, one of the changes that you'll see in the actual fees are that a number of them are lower than what was presented to you at the last time you discussed it. It's in April 29th. And that is a function of any large increase in fees will be applied over 4 years. So we had presented to you a concept of a 2-year ramp up. The fees now will be ramped up over a 4-year period. So that is the new ramp up period that you see tonight that is different than your last discussion.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions in regards to the cost recovery policy and updated user fee schedule? Seeing nothing from my colleagues, and we can take the resolutions either one at a time, or we can take them as we're completed with all. I don't know that there's a preference, but we're going to have to get to all three of them. With no other questions on that, let's move to approving the city appropriations GAN limit for FY 21-22. Are there any questions from my colleagues on that? Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Procedural question, actually. As I was flipping through the attachments, I didn't notice that there was actually a fourth resolution that wasn't listed in the agenda, and it's one for approving fully burdened hourly staff rates. And so since we're stepping through these, I'm just wondering, is that one that we're going to address, or are we not going to address that one because it wasn't on the agenda?
I'll ask staff to opine. Either.
Sure. It was left off, but it is connected to the user fees. A number of the user fees are charged on a per employee basis, and so it was meant to be connected to that.
Thank you.
Okay, anything on the GAN limit? Okay. This is the time. Okay, so with those two, none other. Javon, anything on that? Because I know we have folks that are here. So anything else you want to go over before we move forward?
If I could just jump
Please.
in, Mayor, the user fee update and the fully burdened rates are included in the one resolution you have on that item. So that is covered, the fully burdened rates.
Right. I think Councilmember Salazar was referring to attachment 11, which lists all of the rates.
I see. Okay.
Attachment 10, actually, which is a separate resolution.
Right. That resolution includes the approval of both the fully burdened rates and the new user fees.
Well, we have a resolution in attachment 8 for user fees, and we have a resolution in attachment 10 for staff rates.
Yeah. Right. Let me clarify that. Attachment 8 is the cost recovery policy, and attachment 10 is both the hourly rates and the user fees. So the city council is actually taking two actions with respect to the user fees. You're setting your cost recovery policy, which is that policy that we talked about of the percent recovery on certain fee types. And then in addition to that, you are adopting the specific hourly rates and user fees in the master fee schedule. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and it was a clarification because we listed 3 resolutions. We have 4 resolutions, so I wanted to make sure that we addressed all 4 since we were discussing whether or not we would take them all at once or individually. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss one because they are separated in the packet.
As staff's just verifying, Councilmember Hamilton on GAN or the user fee?
I would just make the suggestion that once we finish deliberation on these two, that we just take the votes on them and get them off the table. I would, especially because there's a little bit of confusion on this one, and we just discussed it, and maybe it might be an hour from now before we come back to vote, and might as well just get them done.
I would agree, especially so that the consultants that are here can depart. Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the loss would be if we waited for the implementation until January of 2022.
Councilmember, I can't say that we have the information to answer that question. When we met with council at our last study session on the user fees. We talked about a September 1 implementation date, and so the proposed budget was adopted with the September 1 implementation date in mind, and we did not carve out the analysis for what it would be if we delayed that implementation until January. It's worth noting that there are a number of projects that are in the pipeline that may pay fees between September 1 and January 1, and so it would certainly have a financial implication. Can't at this moment say exactly what that would be.
Okay, I just know my thoughts are just for, individuals who may have done projects during COVID because maybe they weren't working or, families that have been economically impacted to really try to give people a break this year as much as possible. So if that is something that that would be, well, I guess we don't have an analysis either way. So if it's something that council would consider to have a start date of January of 2022. And I do appreciate the work that's been done to lower some of the fees. Thank you.
Yeah, I think they've been lowered as well as they've been staggered out over a period of time up to 4 years. And we've met on this a couple times. So this would be halting it, having it go back for analysis, having it come back at a later date potentially. So are there any, the city manager, was there any more clarification to the 3 resolutions versus 4, or are we okay?
Yeah. I went back to the agenda. There are 4 resolutions. On the agenda, there are 3 bullets. However, the final bullet says cost recovery policy, which is a separate resolution, and updating the user fee schedule, which is a separate resolution. And so instead of calling it out as 4 individual bullets, the agenda calls it out as 3 bullets, but that last item includes 2. That last bullet includes 2 resolutions. So I know that was confusing. It is captured sufficiently on the agenda, and certainly within the staff report, all 4 resolutions are attached. And so those are related to the master fee schedule. There are 2 resolutions that the city council would like to take action on those. Let me just get to.
Okay.
Numbers.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Medina. This is a lot, and I did want to acknowledge Councilwoman Mason's comments. And I think I'm okay with proceeding tonight because those, as noted, those fees that are the most out of scale, that are so far away from what the actual charges are, we accommodated those increases by breaking it up over 4 years, and our revenues don't match up our expenditures. So I think we've done our part to do our best to minimize the effect of these rate increases, but they're also necessary. So I'm fine with moving forward. I appreciate the work that has been done to make this easier for most people. And I'll be quiet now because I'm going to see if anybody else wants to have any comments, and then we'll go from there to make some motions here. Thank you.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I'm going to say what I had said earlier. I appreciate the comment, but we've met on this, and we are still subsidizing certain classes and activities. So it's not making us whole. It's just trying to get us back to where we need to be and we should be in some cases. There are 2 items. We're going to, let's first take the approval of the GAN limit for 21-22. That is a resolution. Do I have any action by council?
Mayor?
Councilmember Hamilton.
I'd like to propose we adopt the resolution approving city appropriations GAN limit for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Thank you. Is there a second? The motion Hamilton, seconded by Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Mason,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. Next
Motion-
item, I apologize, City Clerk. Item passes 5-0. Next item is the cost recovery policy and updated user fee schedule. Any action by council?
Through the mayor,
Please.
I think we heard though, I think these are two, right? So we have to vote on cost recovery policy separately from user fee? So
No, my understanding was one will take care of both.
One will take care of both. Okay, thank
Unless the city attorney appears, we're going to go forward.
you. Okay.
Oh, he just did.
Yeah.
Oh, thumbs up. Okay.
All right, Tony's good.
Okay.
All right, I would like to propose we approve, propose
Motion?
that we,
Motion to approve.
motion to approve, thank you, the cost recovery policy and updated user fee schedule for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Thank you.
I'll second that one.
Motion by Hamilton, seconded by Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Mason,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, I guess that's the end of the meeting. And no, obviously we have the important one, which is the operations and capital improvement. City Manager, would it be advantageous for us to separate them, or do you want to just clump them together and let the council start to ask?
Given where we are, I think it might be easier to do the capital improvement budget first, and then go back to the operating.
Perfect. All right, let's first, colleagues, you saw the presentation. We've gone through a couple of budget study sessions. This is in regards to capital improvement only. Are there questions or comments from colleagues? Aside from that, I don't see any hands from my colleagues. So I'm going to take that as there are no questions nor concerns as to the city manager, city staff's recommended capital improvement budget. Okay, with that said, let's move on to the operational side. I'm going to begin, if it's okay. I think what we have to get down to, and I was trying to take notes as we were going through this, is really we're going to have some dialogue in regards to enhancements in the measure G, and I apologize. We had our speaker was asking as far as the salaries that are being presented within the budget. Does that include salaries, or is that salaries and benefits, and then the acronym for what we know as the federal assistance? But if you could say what the acronym is on that.
Sure. With regard to the acronym, it is ARPA or ARPA. It is the American Rescue Plan Act that was recently passed, that is providing relief to all municipalities in the country due to revenue losses related to COVID-19. It is allocated based on population, and so our allocation amount is $10.24 million. That money is due to be submitted to the city, or remitted to the city, mind you, in July of next fiscal year, so just a month or a few days from now.
And then the salaries.
With regard to salaries, all of the salary figures that we have shown and talked about are fully loaded, meaning that they cover salary and benefit costs.
Thank you. So on the measure G, I think that's going to be something that we, as a council, we heard from city staff Measure G committee has given recommendations. Of course, those are recommendations to this body. I will tell you what it comes down to, obviously, and you can correct me, is there's 4 positions: police officer, firefighter, fire inspector, economic development manager, also the $600,000 to contribute to public safety / park maintenance. I think those are the items of question. You know, and I know we have this one-time monies, they are APRA, but at the same time, I'll tell you, based on the verbiage within the ballot measure, some of these positions, i.e. the, you know, a fire inspector, the police officer, firefighter, in my mind, they do qualify. There can be a debate on whether staffing was intended or not intended, or how it is perceived or not perceived, and that is how people feel, and you can't change that. But I will tell you, for me personally, I am going to feel very strongly that somehow the police officer, the firefighter, the fire inspector, and I think we've all said the economic development manager is something that's critical. So I want to see those funded, period. I also want to recognize and articulate that police officer and firefighter positions are not enhancements. They're not new positions. Those are trying to restore to where we were, which I think it's critical for public safety in our community. That is one thing I'll tell you as mayor that makes me either stay up or sleep well at night, is to know that we have the men and women serving our community. And at this last budget session, where we had the departments asked to freeze positions, we've had departments across the board, but even in fire and police, that said, hey, we'll get through it. We're going to do our part. But the other concern I have too is at some points, there's vacations, there's maternity, there's injury, there's other elements that may have to, that occur. A strike team has to go out. And I think it's beholden to us to make sure that we don't pull the rubber band so tight that it snaps one day. It's not fair to staff putting on all the overtime, the mandatories if necessary. So, you know, I want to hear from my colleagues, but I will tell you, for me to go forward on this budget, it's going to have an opportunity and an answer as to how we move forward, because I think we've concurred the economic development manager. It is a new role. And on the fire inspector, that also is a cost recovery. So whatever it costs, there are going to be monies that come back in by that task that is performed. And that is another critical necessity, I think, for keeping this community safe and keeping it proactive rather than responding to a fire that occurred because a store wasn't inspected or something went by, you know. And so I just want to give my first comments, and then the last one is, again, it's a $600,000 also that the city manager brought up. So I don't know how my colleagues want to take it. I see the vice mayor's hand is up, but I know the Measure G thing might be something we want to tackle. Maybe we could start tackling it side by side, if that's okay. Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's probably one of the easier ways to kind of get through this. My preference has always been to look at ARPA first when possible. Measure G, yes, is legally allowed to be withdrawn from. However, we also acknowledge, or my argument would be that it was advertised a little heavy on the street repair. And so if we could go ahead and maybe make that decision on where the funding should be from, and then go to each of the individual positions, of whether or not we agree on having those. But before we go too much further, Mr. Mayor, there were some other questions that I have, but I'll reserve for now just to see how far we can get. You're on mute, sir.
I probably sounded the best I've sounded in a long time. I don't know if on the Measure G, if we wanted, because two are restoring positions and two are actual new positions. But I'm hearing that maybe we take maybe that and make a decision. Now, Councilmember Salazar?
I just, I wanted to opine as well. Mayor Medina, you've always been a strong advocate for public safety. Since I've known you, you've always defended those positions, and they're definitely critical. Public safety right now eats up the lion's share of our general fund. It's huge, and I'm not doubting that the positions are necessary. But it is interesting to note that not only do most members of the public that have opined on this, as well as the majority of the members of the committee we appointed, felt that funding salaries was not in the spirit of what was told. And to the letter of the law, you're absolutely right. That's exactly the way it was spelled out, and we said that that would be an appropriate use of it. But I haven't heard anyone come forward and say, yeah, fund salaries with it. Most of the opinions I'm hearing are to the opposite. So I don't think that's a decision we should take lightly, and I think those opinions need to be respected.
Agreed. They need to be funded. I don't if you take it out of A or B, but that they need to be funded is my bottom line. Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, actually, right there at the end there, you said exactly what I was going to say. I don't think there's any debate that these positions need to be funded. It's just a matter of where, and I'll echo the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Salazar's opinions that I would be fine with that, with funding these through ARPA instead of through Measure G, and and especially in light of the staggered way that we'll do it, and eventually transfer them to slowly transfer them to the general fund over time.
Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I think this year is quite critical for Measure G and the public's faith in this council and how we spend those funds. Last year, there was obviously the COVID emergency that was unanticipated, but I did listen in to most of the Measure G committee meeting. I'd actually like to watch the entire meeting, but we just got the link today, and I've been working all day. But there was substantial discussion around this, and one of the areas that we have all committed to is stronger governance, and I think it behooves us to listen to what the advisory committee suggested and recommended, which was pretty adamantly against salaries, especially since last year the funds were not utilized for street repair. And so I would just say that I would not support using Measure G funds for salaries. I would take a look at ARPA. I still think that what I mentioned before, my stance hasn't really changed around having a deputy community services director. We haven't even broken ground on the RAC yet, and this is the big plan for this position. I'm not saying that we don't need it. I read the memo that was sent to all of us. But I am saying that I don't think that position is needed more than the economic development manager position right now. And I also think it's important because I've seen kind of misrepresentations in various locations. The city did have an economic development individual, and it was part of the community. I believe it was the planning or community services, and city manager can correct me, but it was part of the title. So at the time there was one, but I think it was just too much for one position. And when that individual left, that title changed from my recollection to what we have now, which is the community services director. And so this council has actually really pushed to try to get an economic development manager, which is why it's on this budget. And I think the entire council has been supportive of this position. And I would say if there's a position that had to be switched out, I would look at the Deputy Community Services Director position. I would also like to really understand where this is a $194,000 position, and it is not a director level position. It's a deputy director, but it's not the head of a department. And I am curious to know if that's the going salaries for like cities, to oversee the programs that we don't have yet that we will have at some point. Because it does seem a little high. And the other ones, as I mentioned before, I had hoped my position would change around this, but the assistant positions, I think.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Mason?
Yeah.
I was hoping that we can go on the Measure G with the 4 positions and just
Yeah, they're connected because the funds will be available if we switch out some of the ARPA positions. But, you know, I had hoped that we'd hear maybe that there had been a little bit of pivoting or some outside the box thinking. We still have a department that has one director, two deputy directors, and three assistants. And what Mayor Medina said is right. We need a police, right? We need a firefighter. We need a fire inspector. And I'm a little just kind of concerned on what this signifies as far as, you know, what we're prioritizing. Can we have them all? If we can have them all, that would be wonderful. But we have a lot of needs, and I really feel that this year our vote around how we spend the Measure G funds is critical, especially given the results we just received from the stormwater. So I also, I'll save my other comment for later. Thank you.
Thanks. So what I'm hearing from my colleagues, and please correct me, on the four positions, police officer, firefighter, fire inspector, economic development manager, not to use Measure G, but the ARPA. Is that accurate? I see one thumbs up, two thumbs up, a nod, three thumbs up, and a nod. And so there's a 5-0 that we all concur on. It's not a vote, but just the consensus that it's 5-0. And I appreciate that. I think those are important, and we've talked about them. So thank you. The city manager, there was also the $600,000 to contribute to public safety / park maintenance, which I think you went to Measure G. They were not in support of that. That is something you're still bringing forward to us. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor, it is, and let me just get to that slide. I believe I'm sharing my screen right now.
You are.
Okay. Yes. And so that was $600,000 to support the baseline general fund budget. And so the city council did articulate that they would like to see those funds allocated to specific services that align to the intent of Measure G, should they support that. And we did provide those sample allocations, which is funding baseline budget, not enhancements or restoring positions that were reduced, to baseline police officers, to baseline firefighters for a total of $600,000. Or getting the $600,000 in another way, but one police officer, two firefighters, one parks maintenance worker, and $50,000 of parks maintenance operating supplies, again, all baseline. But just important to note that in the current proposed budget, due to COVID-19 and the immediacy of the revenue reductions from COVID-19, the committee supported and the council approved $2 million, and we have not been able to erase or essentially make back that full $2 million in the base revenues, but we have been able to reduce that amount by $1.4 million, and so reducing that to $600,000. Again, what the committee felt is that utilize other sources as much as possible, and there was a mention of ARPA. I would say to the council that with the decision to utilize ARPA for the $1 million of the stormwater deficit and the 4 positions, that you don't have $2 million left in, I'm sorry, $600,000 left in ARPA to pull all of this from ARPA with the other enhancement requests should you approve those. And so you could potentially do $300,000, which would be essentially the remaining ARPA funds, and maybe $300,000 from ARPA, $300,000 from Measure G would be a potential way to reduce the amount from Measure G, but utilize ARPA. And so I would proffer that as an alternative to what's in the proposed budget.
Okay, yeah, that was the 4 positions were $517,000. So you've heard the city manager with a couple of options. Thoughts, colleagues? Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. And the slide that City Manager Grogan showed, that was a lot of work to get it from $2 million down to 600,000. I guess this is where it's going to get really interesting. So the ARPA funding is available, only 300,000 only 300,000 currently is available. So I'm now using the spreadsheet that staff sent to us today that shows the Measure G funding in the middle part of the page. Is that available, City Manager Grogan? It kind of makes it a little easier to kind of bounce around if we could put that up, if available. And my question comes down to this then. If we don't have enough ARPA funding to do everything, then I'm looking at what we could remove out of the ARPA funding table. And that looks like that would be 300,000. And I'm not convinced. I do appreciate the Deputy Community Services Director write-up, but that's 194,000 that I can't support at this time. So I would need to come up, or the council could get my support if we were able to find $106,000.
Through the mayor, can I just make one clarifying point?
Yes, please.
So if I can go to that table, because it's important to note that the funding for the deputy director position that was included in the proposed budget, there are some offsets. The 194 was a fully loaded cost. Only 91,000 is in the proposed budget for the current year. And so it's not the full 194. Just wanted to make that clarification.
That's appreciated. And City Manager Grogan, do you have this position request, or is that the best table to use that you're using there, so that it's we could all follow as I think we're going to be bouncing back and forth?
Yeah, I think this table would be the best because it has the proposed allocations and the ARPA funding. What's not here right now are the 4 positions that council is moving from Measure G to ARPA. But if we're talking about the proposed ARPA fundings, I think this is the best table to talk from. Okay.
That'll conclude my comments for now as we wait to hear from our other colleagues. Thank you.
And again, as we hear next from Councilmember Salazar, City Manager gave an option of using the remainder of the ARPA of 300,000 to help offset the 600 to 300. So maybe you can also articulate whether you're okay with that. Councilmember Salazar.
I was going to say that I really get nervous when we start making large-scale decisions from the dais without having a real opportunity to digest all of this. Councilmember Mason brought up some good questions about which positions really are priorities and which ones align with our strategic goals. And staff has provided us with an option to approve of the CIP and continue this discussion. And given the results that we saw earlier this afternoon from the stormwater ballot and given those requirements, I would really like to come back and see all of the enhancements fully reflecting all of those commitments, including an ongoing support for stormwater now that it won't be funded through a property tax. I want to see all of those things sort of spelled out the way we've seen the migration from Measure G and ARPA to general fund. I want to see how that is going to play in because we have to do something with that. And it's not a one-time $1 million commitment. It's an ongoing, at least $1 million commitment going forward for stormwater. And I think that's a reality that we didn't have when we started these discussions, but it's definitely a reality now. And so I'd like to see how all of these changes, including input from the Measure G committee, the new liability we have from stormwater, all of those things play together over the next several years, not just for the current budget.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Councilmember Hamilton.
So I agree with Councilmember Salazar. It would be good to be able to see all the changes that we've discussed, and be able to look at it in an organized way, because we're moving around a lot of money here, and really, as Council Member Salazar said, understanding how we're going to continue to fund the stormwater problem is important. I don't know how far we can push it off because we need to approve a budget though. So, and for the stormwater, we're going to need to do we said in the previous session tonight that we're going to organize a study session for that. Regarding the Deputy Community Development Director position, I'm in agreement with the Vice Mayor and Council Member Mason that that's not something that I think we should fund in this year, just given all of our other challenges. I definitely would be supportive of looking at it for the next fiscal year, but for this year, I wouldn't be supportive of that. And then I do have a question about, we haven't got to this topic yet, and if we need to push this topic off a little bit, but it's still part of the Measure G. The Oversight Committee did not recommend the $300,000 for the downtown streetscape plan, but I didn't hear. It was very, very clear their reasoning for not funding the other items, but I didn't hear the reasoning for that one, and I just like to understand. And I didn't get a chance to watch the recording either today, so I was wondering.
And good point, Councilor. I can tell you what I've heard, but I'd rather hear it from our city manager, who is present and interacting with the committee. City manager.
Sure. Absolutely, Councilmember Hamilton. There were two really articulated reasons from the committee for not supporting that item. One was it appeared to be $300,000, in their words, $300,000 to work toward implementing the downtown streetscape plan, which is a $10 million plan, without knowing exactly when we would have the funds to implement portions of that plan. We did articulate that it was to develop a block-by-block schematic of installation of trees and as well as other landscapes, but without a understanding on exactly when and how that would be funded, they were not supportive of using Measure G funds, thinking that it would be studying for the sake of studying. From a staff perspective, I know that we've had significant conversations with the council, and it was one of the city council's strategic initiatives to do what we can to move forward with some improvements to downtown, and starting with that plan was the recommended next appropriate step for staff. In addition, what the committee mentioned was, or I wouldn't say that this came from the entire committee, but there were questions raised about what contributions would there be from downtown, from businesses downtown, to help pay for portions of the streetscape plan. Would the city, or is the city considering a T-bid, a business improvement district, or other funding mechanisms? And so we didn't really have the time to discuss all of those. With regard to another question that was raised by, I think, Councilmember Hamilton, Councilmember Salazar, I do want to pull up one slide because we did prepare some information for the City Council. And so this slide right here does present the decisions that you've made and actually allows you to understand what the full costs are. And so with the proposed ARPA funding, adding in those 4 positions, we did do that work to say one of the decisions for the City Council would be to add in those 4 positions. This is the dollar amount on that 4-year ramp down of 25%. And so of the $10 million, including those 4 positions, the amount is $8.8 million. And so there was $1.3 million left to fund the stormwater deficit, which the City Council in the prior meeting decided to do. So we didn't adjust this between the 5:30 meeting and the 7:30 meeting, but the math has been done for you. And so you know that should you fund that 1 million from stormwater, you're looking at a residual amount of ARPA of 394,000. And so that's why I did say that you could potentially pull 300 from ARPA and another 300 from Measure G to make that 600 allocation that was originally going to come from all from Measure G. So I just wanted to point that out, that those numbers have been projected and done for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. So going back to the streetscape one, thank you for providing those the details of their discussion. I've been very, very clear on my position on this since joining the council that that we need to start making improvements downtown and not wait for full funding, and I sound like a broken record, but waiting for money to fix downtown has been the policy here for decades. And we need to show our residents and our merchants that we are committed to making changes downtown. So while I appreciate the Oversight Committee's hard work, I disagree with their recommendation on that line item, and I think that 300,000 should come from Measure G. Regarding the other positions, the 600,000, I could be talked into splitting it 300 each between ARPA and Measure G. While I completely understand the Oversight Committee's reluctance to use Measure G for salaries, and I, in a perfect world, I should absolutely share that policy myself. The failure of the stormwater really, changes the game for us here. And I don't think that we, I do think that we need to end the year with the 1.5 in general fund reserve as per the recommendation. And so we shouldn't be pulling that from the general fund. And I think I would be supportive of having that 600,000 be half funded by Measure G and half funded by ARPA.
Again, we're still on the 600,000 that was put forward. You've heard Councilmember Hamilton, 300 and 300. He also made a comment on the downtown, but on the 600 specifically, splitting at 300 and 300. Based on council comments as well, may I say, it sounds like on the 91,000 plus, let's just round it down, right? 91,000 for the Deputy Community Services Director. And if that's not going to be utilized, that could also be put in to defray it even more, right? So it doesn't have to be 300 and 300. It can be 200 and change. And so anyway, just because I've already heard that articulated. So other thoughts from my colleagues on the 600,000 or Measure G items? Councilmember Mason.
I would just say, for me, I'd like to, I do agree with Councilmember Salazar that I would support continuing the item because I would like to hear what the Measure G committee said specifically around these funds, the 600,000. And then I would just comment that I did listen to the 300,000. I do think we should try to take that out of our general fund. I don't believe that was the spirit, at least at this time, of Measure G. And again, given that funds were not spent last year on street repair, I really think that needs to be our focus this year. I think our residents want to see the change, and I feel like there's a way that we can find those funds in the general fund and still meet our commitment to both downtown and to Measure G and the street repair.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, how did you know? Thank you. Yeah, it seems like having staff do a little more calculation would be fine. I think I'm prepared to go forward with a few things here. But since, well, let me just state the obvious. I'm in support of doing something downtown. I think it's very, very clear that our community does support that. The San Bruno Community Foundation did have a survey, and downtown was like one of the, if not the first or second, I can't recall where it was, but our community wants a nicer downtown, and we need to plan. And this is exactly what we talked about, and maybe the Oversight Committee wasn't aware of the depth of the conversations that we had over it. So going back and having another talk about it, we do have to approve a budget. I'm open to hearing how our city manager proposes to go forward with this. However, I'm also open to spending the money with the Measure G money for that piece. Again, looking at ARPA first, we haven't gone through all of the positions yet, Mr. Mayor. I asked staff a few questions about a number of the items. The public works and parks maintenance workers. I'm in support of the idea of bringing people back in order to do more, but I'm interested in knowing specifically what more is going to get done. I also brought up my concern about the medians, and it is my understanding that these additional workers have so much to do that they probably will not get to maintain the medians, but that's something that I think is also important. So how about I stop now? I do have some questions in general about all of this basis of this budget. Doesn't include any increased costs in pensions, doesn't include any increased cost in healthcare coverage. The question is, it's currently set at 0, but we know it's going to go up. Do we have an estimate of what it's going to go up? The worst thing that a council can do is bring on new staff and then not be able to pay for it. And then you're going to have to lay people off. Well, we have a contract currently that we're not allowed to lay people off. So we need to make sure that, I believe this council should be fully aware of all those things as best as we can. And we're pressed up against time now. So I'm looking forward to hearing how our city manager proposes to move forward. Thank you.
So let's start to leave the Measure G per se. I think we've articulated on the 4 positions. The last one was 600,000. There is still 300 from. There still is 300, like Tom had said, to split it. But also there was a concern on the 300 for downtown, whether that should come out from G or not. Also, we have other positions that, depending if they're funded or not, that may add, and doesn't have to be equal and equal. But let's start to open the dialogue, since there's much more to the budget as well, as the Vice Mayor said. And City Manager, if you could direct us to what would be best, so we could start, taking this in a strategic order.
One quick clarification, please.
Yep.
The ARPA money available is $394,000, based on the slide the city manager provided. So
that is true. I'm sorry, through the mayor, that is true.
Yes, please.
I think I've heard a majority of the city council say that they are not in favor of funding the deputy director position at that time, and so we can add another 91,000 to that available number. And so we'll give you the total on that in just one second. In response to Council Member Medina's comments, I'd like to sort of have those discussions, and I know staff is here ready to provide answers. It is my recommendation that if possible, we would end tonight with a adopted operating and capital budget. I would say that with regard to the allocations from Measure G for the downtown streetscape program, we did commit to return to the Measure G committee and have additional discussions. And so the city council could really make a decision tonight to fund that from, as we talked about, the general fund capital reserve, or you could direct staff to just continue to have additional conversations with the committee, and you could make that decision later. In addition, I want to say just overall that we won't be able to solve the stormwater challenge before we have to adopt a budget. And so I know that we have to have those discussions, and we are certainly committed to having them. But we're not going to be able to identify a path forward before we have to adopt a budget by July 1. And so if we can address some of the other questions, maybe we can get there. I do want to share a screen really quick because Councilmember Medina mentioned, do we know what the additional pension and healthcare costs, and is that factored in the budget? So the answer to that is absolutely. I just sort of in the interest of time while you were asking the question, Councilmember Medina, I did pull up our PowerPoint slide from June 1st that had a total of 159 slides. But a few of the slides we did go through were the additional pension costs that are included in the proposed budget. And so there is a included an increase of $43,000 in additional pension costs. There is an additional $1.1 million of the unfunded actuarial liability. And with regard to health costs, we did include, based on knowing what the rates will be for the coming fiscal year and projecting out what the rates will be for we know what the rates will be definitely for the last 6 months of the calendar year, which are the first 6 months of the fiscal year. With regard to the second 6 months of the fiscal year, we always make projections. And so we have projected an increased cost of our health and insurance costs of $370,000 that's included in the budget. And all of our projections that go forward include factors for increased pension costs, because we know that based on this table in our actuarial projections, as well as assumptions for increase in healthcare costs. So I would just say that yes, those costs were factored in, included in the proposed budget, and included in all of the projections. With regard to the question on what additional work will be done with the restoration of the parks maintenance worker positions, we do have Director Ann Matola that is ready to provide council with an answer to that question. So through the mayor, I'll direct it to Director Matola for that.
Please.
Good evening, council members. Ann Matola, Community Services Director. So what we didn't have time to do since the last time we met, and Councilmember Vice Mayor Medina asked about kind of a study on this. We certainly didn't have the time in 2 weeks to do a study. But what we do know in the field, I think I spoke a little bit about how we tend to be always running behind. And I think this is no secret. This is something which council has reacted to. So why add another person if we know we're not going to catch up on like seeing some real marked improvement? And it always comes to the median strips. So what I will say is that when you have another person added to the crew, what it does is kind of those perfunctory tasks that they do every day in every one of the parks, they go quicker. So 40 staff hours would probably free another 40 hours of one of our more senior staff that can hit some of the more technical aspects which always tend to get pushed behind. So what are some of those things? If you go into the park, you'll see some of our infrastructure pieces, which may be in disrepair, a lot of bleachers and benches. So we could probably be more on top of that. Irrigation, particularly during the sports season, when the fields are in high use, we want to be immediately responsive to irrigation. And a lot of times when we take our crews off for doing that regular daily maintenance, we get behind on that, but because we want to make sure our users are served. So I can't give you a precise measurement, but just by the pace of the work that currently our park staff is experiencing right now, it would really alleviate and give us the ability to be a little bit more responsive, a little bit more I wouldn't say proactive, but certainly responsive as those things come up for our users. And the other thing I'll say is, while we're not like public safety, right? If one of our people are on sick and vacation, it's not a safety issue for the community. We don't have constant staffing requirements or anything of that nature. But what it does do is it makes it, particularly this time of year, as we're seeing as people do put time in for vacations, whatnot, where again, we really are stretched thin, and just having that one more person to rotate in should just help us keep us from our parks falling into disrepair. And so I think that's really an important part of this ask and this request. I think what the city is seeing is certain things are kind of falling in disrepair. So we're going to keep falling a little bit behind until we staff up. And I think part of what we do need to do is to do some type of an evaluation, a study similar to what many communities do to make sure the park staffing is adequate for the type of space that we maintain. Parks are different than open space, are different than median strips, different than fields, and they're all different standards for care for those different types of aspects. So we can do that for you, but the immediate problem of us following is that we are kind of falling behind, and we're hoping to fall less behind. So hopefully that helps a little bit explain the environment that we're working in and how the position will help.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Yeah, and before I get too far ahead of myself here, thank you, City Manager Grogan, for the slides that showed those increases. That was helpful. It clearly slipped my mind, but thank you for providing those. So I understand how more bodies help out. I didn't have much working experience in the parks, being that I was in public works. So has apparently the usage of summertime help. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that could possibly also be used to allow some additional rotating in to cover some of the absences that you were talking about? Is it that we didn't do as much summertime help due to COVID, or what is the current policy and practice of?
Sure. So seasonally we do, and I think you are referring to the seasonal help that we hire in during the PQ season. So we do hire additional staff. I can tell you hiring part-time staff has been extremely challenging. We've had a recruitment open for probably 2 months. I think we are just close to hiring our second person to help. Because of PERS rules, they are limited on the hours that they can work weekly. So it does take several of them to kind of rotate on a weekly basis. So we can use them. They are actually, just right now in this environment, for some reason, they're very challenging to recruit. But we are actually looking at that resource as well to try to resolve this problem.
That's definitely helpful, and it's understandable that the labor market right now is really stressed. In today's budget, on page B4, there's a small item about the need for overtime. Overtime is something that's typically rarely used, and do we have an overtime policy? I can only base my experience when I was in public works, and we rarely ever had overtime unless it was paid for by a project. So I was wondering if you can kind of comment on the usage of overtime.
So there's always
and the need for it.
There's always a baseline amount of overtime for a couple of reasons. One of them has to do with the on-call of our trade team. So when there are certain winds, we have to put people on standby. Sometimes they're called in, sometimes not, but that will incur overtime. So that takes a chunk of it. What we did was we intentionally added some overtime in there to
we took a look at certain programs, certain aspects of parks that need to be rehabilitated. There are a couple of projects which aren't capital projects, but which a crew of staff could probably take care of. And one of them is a college drive median strip project. And so we wanted to put some overtime in there because this is not the normal, if you're looking at the rotation that we're trying not to get behind on, we looked at things that were outside of that and valued what the overtime would be in order to address staff. And then also what happens is so in the summer, when we do hire our seasonal staff, they typically will fortify and take on the weekend shifts, and we kind of alternate shifts. During the off season, we still have to have staff come in and check the facilities on the weekends. And they usually come in, it could be 2 to 3 hours a day, no more than that. And so that's also part of the overtime budget. And that's been there consistently.
Final question. And maybe this is probably going to be streets, so I'll hold off on that. So my parks questions are finished.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it is good if we take it by department. I'm just trying to figure a way so we kind of keep succinct going through. Since we have the director on screen and what have you, is there anything within recreation, parks, senior services, library, other than what the vice mayor has asked? Okay. Other questions from my colleagues on the budget? Councilmember Salazar, please.
Not a question per se, Mr. Mayor, but I understand the city manager and his team's desire to approve a budget, and I agree. I share that interest in doing that. And one path forward I would propose is that if there are still some questions on the improvements and how some of those things would be funded, I would be in favor of approving the budget without the enhancements and the CIP, so that we could move forward, have that budget approved, and then come back to look at the enhancements at a subsequent meeting where we could perhaps spend more time on some of the detailed things. I still have, I think I stated this before, that I have a lot of faith in the city manager and his team in terms of how they want to allocate the resources and where they want to prioritize things. So I'm less concerned about getting into the weeds on those things as I am about how we're going to pay for these things and how they look over the next several years. I really like what staff and the city manager did in presenting us that forecast where we see how the funds transition from one to the other. And I really would like to see these other priorities included in that forecast, so that I truly understand where we make a transition from one-time funds and how we start burdening the general fund with those same commitments over time, and how it all balances out. Because right now I'm very nervous about how those things look over the long run.
Council member, just so I'm clear, because I think you said not the capital, but you're saying yes on the capital, allow that to go forward. No on the enhancements.
No enhancements.
The general day-to-day operations, yes. Your suggestions. When it comes to the monies that would be used from the federal government from COVID, are you saying for those to go forward at the $517,000?
Yes. And I would definitely be in favor of using the recovery money for the backfill positions, not the enhancements right at this time, but definitely for the backfill.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you for allowing me to get clarification. If I'm doing my math on that 600K, which that's not what we're talking about right now, I think you'd be about needing another 114,000, 115,000 in order to get to the 600. The city manager.
Yes, if you will, we have prepared a new slide that will articulate where we are should the city council decide not to fund the deputy director position. I just want to walk the city council through it really quickly. And so it provides, I think, clarity to exactly what you were saying, Mayor Medina. So what we've done for this summary is that we have taken out that deputy director position that was here, and not just the proposed year, which is what the figures we were calculating were based on, but all of the subsequent years. And so what that does is that it reduces the total position funding number, and it provides enough funds to cover that entire transfer to from the general fund. Because again, we're not funding that deputy director position in the out years. And so with the 112 in business grants, the 750 in the CIP budget, funding the $1 million in stormwater, transferring in $6 million in Measure G, and the position funding as proposed, adding in the 4 positions from Measure G, it provides a total usage of $10.046 million. And so I just wanted to provide that information to the City Council. We were able to update this slide based on the information and the decisions that you have made tonight. And wanted to show you that you do have the ability to transfer in to the general fund $600,000. And again, we would tie those to baseline general fund expenditures.
Thank you very much for you and staff doing that slide. Appreciate that. Does Councilmember Salazar?
Thank you, sir. So that is an interesting approach, but I believe staff had made a pretty compelling reason to fund that position at some point. And with the rec center coming online within that time frame, we're going to have to pay for it somehow in some of those outlying years. So again, we may solve the problem today, but we're creating another problem for tomorrow, and so on. And that's where I get stuck on this, is that we can't make those commitments without thinking about what's going to happen, because we know we're going to need that position. So yes, we can defer it, but that bottom line number today is not what we'll be facing when we do this again next year.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor, if you're trying to speak.
I was listening to myself.
That's 2 times.
Councilmember Mason, sorry.
Yeah, I think I would just suggest that the conversation around the position, not, however we move forward tonight, but that it not end tonight, that we actually continue to communicate with the city manager on a path forward. Because I think we'll agree that a position, whether it be that position or something similar that's going to be handling the programs, is needed. I did want to ask, the slide that was just shown a moment ago, it had the other 3 positions on the bottom, the police officer, firefighter, and fire inspector. Are those, I just wanted to make sure, those also would, under that slide, they would not be Measure G funds? Or where would they come from, I guess, is really the question.
They would come from ARPA, the ARPA funds. So they are included in the ARPA positions. So it includes the 4 positions that were proposed to be funded by Measure G: the economic development manager, police officer, firefighter, and fire inspector. And so that the costs for those are included in this line item that you see here.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's great, quick work there, City Manager Grogan. But clearly, at some point, the Deputy Community Services Director is going to be needed to step in there. So I know we only approve 1-year budgets. We're going to have difficulty, it seems like, quite often in dealing with budgets, but I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure City Manager Grogan's going to be able to do something clever with those projections.
Okay, so far there has been a suggestion that's brought forward, which is to approve the capital to approve the day-to-day operating budget, to approve all funding from the ARPA funds. This is a suggestion from Councilmember Salazar. On the 600,000, I think Councilmember Salazar brought up like, okay, but that doesn't take care of tomorrow, right? Getting the 600 out of the transfer, but staff's doing the math. So his suggestion also was to bring back the enhancement positions for more detail and further discussion. What is the desire of the colleagues or other suggestions?
I can get a second. I will make a motion to move my proposal forward and just fund the baseline budget with the CIP and the use of the ARPA funds.
Was there a
Mr.
second
Mayor?
to that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there a second to the motion?
Okay.
I'll second it.
Close, but I just wanted to. Okay.
But for clarification to the motion maker, is that also to bring back? It was also to bring back the enhancement positions, right?
Correct. That is correct.
All right. Is there any discussion on that or an amendment to the motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Vice Mayor?
I'd be interested in hearing where our city manager could respond to like how of going forward in this direction.
Sure. So through the mayor,
please.
I want to clarify the city council's intent because we do need to approve a budget before July 1. A continuing resolution does continue to fund the government, but it does not include the enhancements nor other baseline items that were not in the prior year's budget. One option, if the city council did land with not acting tonight, would be to schedule a meeting prior to July 1. And so there is a Tuesday the 29th or any other day that the city council could make to have additional discussions on the budget. Another option would be to simply approve the budget as proposed by Councilmember Salazar, but not have those discussions prior to July 1. And if the council would like to discuss that, I do think it's worth having significant conversations around that. And I do see challenges with that, given positions that we are anticipating hiring, and in particular, with regard to our public safety positions, where people are set to go to the academy, or we have lateral applicants that are already sort of in the process waiting on if this is approved. You know, if council says don't hire them, we won't hire them. But if we were sort of inclined to hire them, it would be nice not to lose candidates that we know have already approached and have begun the process. You know, it is my recommendation that if the city council can adopt a budget tonight, we would adopt a budget and, of course, continue to have conversations around long-term financial challenges that certainly are not going away. 110% recognize and thank the city council for articulating that some level of additional deputy or other positional support is needed in the community services department. Absolutely, if we are not approving that position in this current budget year, we would certainly continue to look for permanent funding for that position, and knowing that it would not be ARPA, but we would need to at a later date identify permanent ongoing funding.
Just for clarification and council member, unless I misunderstood and city manager, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I think the council member had said to approve the CIP, to approve the day-to-day operational budget, to approve anything from the ARPA, which I believe is the public safety personnel. So that would take care of that. So I see that goes forward. That's a done deal. What only thing would be coming back is the enhancements of positions that are outside of that. And correct me, Councilmember Salazar.
No, that's exactly right.
Mayor, there are no enhancements outside of the ARPA positions. And so let me sort of go back.
Thank you.
Because what I heard you articulate, but I'm sorry I didn't think was the point, was to approve these positions and the capital budget and the other operating budget. That's what I heard articulated, and I think that would be fine because we're approving an adopted budget. But what I thought I heard Councilmember Salazar articulating was not to approve the enhancements, which would be these positions. It's also worth noting that these, when we say enhancements, we are, while we've been talking around the ARPA enhancements, there are other enhancement positions that are not ARPA enhancements. Some are general fund, and some are actually funded by other revenue sources. For example, the contract officers from YouTube are part of the enhancement package, but there's not a funding request tied to those, and they don't show up in this portrait because they are not funded by ARPA.
First the Vice Mayor, then Councilmember Salazar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This is still on the question.
I'm gonna let Councilman Salazar go ahead and go forward. Just stating that I'm pretty close, and I think being the hour, it's 9:41. It's not that late, and we've worked way harder on these budgets. That I don't have much objections to anything else. I think we're really close, but I'll be quiet.
Well, I mean, if the majority of the council wants to move forward and approve this, I'll withdraw my motion, and whoever wants to make it a different motion can definitely go forward. I still do not think that what we've been presented tonight adequately represents what we came into this expecting. There's still a lot of questions in my mind. I've heard other council members state questions about where the priorities should be. I saw a slide in there somewhere that said that there were some public safety positions that were just being backfilled, that they were not enhancements. So there's my confusion around what is an enhancement, what is not an enhancement, what's new, what's not new, what was there before and just frozen versus, so I still have a lot of questions, and so I am not comfortable approving it, but if the majority wants to move forward, then I withdraw my motion.
Councilmember Hamilton, you haven't had an opportunity.
So I agree that I think we are close, and I don't know how much value we would get by pushing it off for another week. If it makes it easier, try to get one of the other questions off of the table. Earlier, I had brought up the streetscape plan, and the city manager suggested that we fund that. That in the adopted budget, we fund that through the general fund, capital reserve, and one-time initiatives fund, but that there would be additional discussions with the Measure G Oversight Committee, and possibly be able to get it back on there. And I would be fine with that. If that helps.
That's how I understood it too, Councilmember Hamilton. They didn't see the exact plan, and so had that opportunity, that may have changed their view. And so I would concur with what you just said. Vice Mayor Medina.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was a previous hand up. I didn't lower it, so I'm pretty good.
I'm sorry.
But since you did call on me, I mean, a lot of the enhancements are in IT, replacing switches and all these things that we know need to be done. I'm looking at page B5. Net impact of the fund, 105,000 more or less, and we need all those, and I have no objection to any of those. But let's see how we can get around a consensus. That would be pretty nice.
Well, no, I don't think anybody's too far off. I think where Councilmember Salazar and I get it. It's always great to get a budget done. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm saying we are almost there. It's about long term. It's about looking down that it's okay. Well, we're not going to do it this time, but then we take it out. So there's just a lot of variables, and I think we're this $1 million that we had to backfill. These are one-time monies. They're eventually going to be gone. What's the long-term plan? Yes, staff can come back. And I think that's where the council member was having that concern is in looking at it holistically, globally, really in the big term. Councilmember Mason.
Sorry. So I think that I agree actually with everything everybody has said. There was a new hire report and vacancy list sent to us in response to a question raised in our last meeting. If that helps at all with one of the questions, I do think that the question around, when I look at this list, I know that all these departments need these positions, and I feel comfortable knowing that the Measure G funds have been moved under ARPA. And thank you, City Manager. I don't think that was a surprise. This has been discussed before as a concern and raised by the committee. But I do think what would be interesting to know, I don't have to know it tonight, but is when you mentioned that there are people that are maybe moving laterally within the different departments, does that mean that that's freeing up funds from the position that they need to be moving out of? And so I am just trying to figure out how we're going to be able, because what I don't want is to hire a bunch of people just to not be able to keep them in a year. But I think at least two positions, I believe, are positions within the agency with existing employees. And so I'm not sure how many of those there may be. I'm not sure what the process is. And again, I'm not sure that we even need to get into that level of detail tonight. I am comfortable with the move from the Measure G committee to Measure G to ARPA. And I think the question I have remaining is around that $300,000 and whether do we need consensus on that to move that from Measure G to come from the general fund?
Well, I'm going to have the city manager respond, and I know Councilmember Hamilton, which I concurred with on how he stated, which is it was there, but to go back to Measure G, which the city manager had stated, because they did not have that opportunity, their concern was, what's the plan? You're asking for money, but what's the plan? We don't write a check without a plan. That's how my understanding.
Right, and I think I'm asking for something different, which is, can we go ahead and take it out of the general fund? Because let's be honest, the downtown streetscape plan is $20 million, so that conversation can still go back to the committee. And it was ranked #1 in the last meeting that I attended with the San Bruno Foundation. So who knows if there's going to be money invested as well from the foundation. But I do think for purposes of moving this forward, that would be a helpful answer if possible.
City manager.
Sure. I think I can address both of those. Councilmember Mason, with regard to my statement about a lateral hire, I understand your articulation. The way you articulated it, it was a lateral hire going from one department of the city to another department of the city. I'm sorry, that's not how I meant it. How I meant it is we're in the process of actually hiring lateral police officers. And so it's not that we're putting someone new through the academy, but someone transferring lateral from another department. And those are, for our police officers, we have an open and continuous recruitment given the turnover and periodic vacancies. And so when you get a lateral, it's oftentimes you want to be able to have that position to say yes, or else they'll go to another agency. That's what I meant with regard to that. With regard to your other questions, I do want to bring up a slide, and let's just begin this really quickly. Slideshow from the beginning. And so with regard to the decisions we were talking about, it was really the stormwater deficit, the 4 positions that were proposed to be funded by Measure G, the $600,000 transfer, and the $300,000. And I think we've almost addressed all of those. And so let's go through this. What I asked staff to do in the magic of Zoom, they were able to do it, because Councilmember Salazar asked which of these positions are restorations and which of these are new. And so we were able to highlight in blue the positions that are new. And so that is the, many of them were asterisks already. And so that is the IT associate. We talked about that. That is a new IT associate to support our police and fire infrastructure. Will be shared jointly. The long range advanced senior planner, as the city council knows, we do not have a long range and advanced senior planner. And so there's been many of efforts to have that position so that our plans and our advanced planning work can actually occur and we're not solely relying on updating plans by contractors. There's a senior planner, 75% will be funded by developer reimbursements, 25% by the city. The economic development manager that we've of course talked a lot about, and then the fire inspector, which is that new fire inspector to help run the city's citywide wildfire mitigation and prevention plan, and everything that we've talked about with that. It's the Crestmore Canyon work. It's the citywide work addressing our areas that city property that we need to do fire mitigation and landscape clearing, as well as working with other agencies and Caltrans, for example, like we recently did on the project to clear significant eucalyptus trees along 280. So those are the 5 that are new. The others are all restorations from positions that were eliminated from the budget due to COVID-19. And the proposal is to use the Federal Recovery Act funds or Rescue Act funds as they were intended to help cities like ours gradually recover from COVID-19. And the financial projections that we have is building in the 25% of the cost to the general fund. So by 25-26, the general fund is fully supporting those costs. And so this is again that summary sheet of ARPA with the decisions that council has made tonight, which is utilizing $1 million to cover the stormwater deficit. You haven't made the decision, but we talked about utilizing the transfer into the general fund that will be tied to specific positions of $600,000, and then those position requests that we just saw. Again, the longer trajectory of these using just under 10 million, leaving an unallocated ARPA balance of 193,000. Lastly, there was the item of where and or how do we fund the 300,000 for the downtown streetscape? We proposed Measure G. We know that the committee did not support that. Council has talked about going back and further articulating when we go back to Measure G about the rationales behind that recommendation. But you've also talked about in order for this work to proceed forward, as it is a strategic initiative, utilizing other funds that we have and what staff recommended or offered as an alternative is using 300,000 in our general fund capital reserve and one-time initiatives fund that has a net balance of $5 million when we include the funding for the RAC. And so should council want to adopt a budget with these changes, as well as identifying one of these 2 sources, I think that would comprise the decisions that you talked about, or the items that you talked about, and allow council to adopt a budget tonight, should you so desire.
Councilor Mason.
Yeah, you used a term that I'm not very familiar with. Can you go back to what exactly does restoration mean?
Absolutely. So restoration means positions that were funded they were funded positions and they were frozen during the at the beginning of the last budget cycle when we needed to cut $8.2 million from the budget. And so these positions were funded positions.
if I remember correctly, though, for example, police officer is a position that has been vacant for some time. That, and I'll just get to my point. I want to just be really very transparent that last year they weren't in the budget, right? And without having another graph of 1 year, 2 years, however long they've been vacant, we wouldn't know on the spot. But for purposes of making the decision, these are positions we don't have this year. And when we look at the, let me see what the total projected cost is. Let's say we're looking at the annual totals. That's what we're responsible for a year from now. So whether the position was vacant last year or the year before that, it just makes me feel like it was not part of the budget. And so we should be planning for next year to fund this amount, whether it's a restored position or it's a brand new position. Regardless, the total amount of money is something we're going to have to fund next year.
That is true, but if I can, let me clarify. By restored, what I mean is the position was funded in the 1920 budget. It was a funded position in the 1920 budget. Now, when we got to the point of we needed to freeze positions, that position may have been vacant, but it was a funded position. That is certainly true for the police officer, firefighter, and our associate. This is our traffic engineer. Our traffic engineer was a budgeted funded position. That position was the incumbent left to go to another agency. But when we adopted the budget, it was a funded position, but it was vacant. And so we froze it at that time. And so while there was not a person occupying it, it was a funded position. It just so happened that the person left during that fiscal year. And so you're absolutely right. Should we restore the positions, we would have to fund them in subsequent years. And the proposal is to fund 75 from ARPA, 50, 25 along the next couple of years, and have the general fund pick up 25%. And the only caveat as I look at this list that I want to clarify is the senior building inspector. That should actually be blue here because that's an on-demand position. And the executive assistant was again, as we talked about, a funded position. It was just funded as a public information officer, but it was a funded position.
Okay, so the public information officer was a funded and approved position by the council last year?
Last year is in 1920, yes. Pre-COVID-19, yes. Frozen, like the police officer, the traffic engineer, the firefighter, the public works maintenance worker, yes, frozen in the current budget year 2021. And that's what we did because we were faced with immediate reduction due to COVID-19 and no help from the federal government. We froze vacant positions in order to not lay off employees.
So I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper because I just don't remember that. I don't remember that position approved. So when you say it was frozen, did it come to us as a fully budgeted position with the intent to hire last year in the last budget cycle?
In the 1920 budget cycle, so not the current year, but the prior year, it was a funded position. And as we talked about earlier, the PIO position in the city manager's office was a funded position, and I had full authority to hire that position. I did not do that, but it was a funded position. Yes, absolutely.
So I think, so you're talking about, okay, 19, so I would not know, I wasn't here, but for 20, I do remember this being, you and I speaking about this. Okay, so I just want to make sure that, this is, this is a team that's been created, and I think as you're building the team, we all have a responsibility to ensure that there's longevity to what we're creating and what we're approving. So if the city manager has confidence that there's going to be funds to continue to pay for these positions after the ARPA money is due, and that's the commitment that's being made now through what we're hearing, I'm comfortable with it because I know I think we all have seen our streets. We've all had complaints from residents about a number of these positions that are needed. But I would just ask that in the future we have a significant amount of clarity around these positions. I think it's been very difficult to dig and really understand where these positions came from, how they're being how they're being prioritized, and then within the priority categories within the departments is which positions are truly new, and if a position's been vacant for a few years, that really is kind of a new position because we hadn't budgeted it in the past. So I just think it would be nicer to have a little more clarity around these positions.
I'm going to have a couple comments. First, I don't think it's fair to any city manager to say he or she can guarantee the future. You know, nobody could have guaranteed that we were going to get a COVID and do what we did. So the city manager and his team at this point are putting together what they believe based on the economy, based on the rebound, based on how the city is doing. When you have a position that's been funded, like the communications person, that has been funded and on the books, and there's monies allocated for that. Because it's vacant doesn't make it a new position, because we didn't get rid of it and bring it back. It just wasn't filled. Therefore, those monies weren't used, and those monies were used to balance the budget. So it's not new. It's restored. It was defunded, then it's refunded, or however the terms. But I don't know. You know, the city manager and his team brings forward to us their best knowledge and thoughts and profession at this time. But I couldn't put it on his or his team's shoulder to say you've got a guarantee, because the future is uncertain. And that's why we have amendments to the budget that come back for us to make adjustments if and when needed. So anyway, Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, sir. I agree with you that I realize staff doesn't have a crystal ball, but I do feel, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, the things we do know about, we need to reflect. And I agree with Councilmember Mason that this is not immediately transparent. And in prior budget years, whenever we talk about enhancements, those are additions to our budget. And perhaps 1920 it had the positions, but if 2021 didn't, then they were gone. So if we didn't have a placeholder for them, if we didn't account for them and then have a surplus because we didn't have to pay for them, then they're gone. And then they truly are enhancements. So I think that just causes a lot of confusion. And you know, I kind of came into this conversation thinking there were some positions that were actually held there and we were just allocating funds because they were still in the budget. Now I'm hearing they got pulled after last year and now they're coming back. So that's different. Then they truly are enhancements. And so I think, you know, again, a lot of confusion around that. And that's why I'm really not comfortable moving forward with this.
Well, folks, any other thoughts? I mean, I think, like everybody said, we're good on a lot of stuff. I know, just I'll put my 2 cents on the 300,000 that would become from reserves. You know, is that the best thing to automatically say we're going to take it out of reserves? We need to keep a balance of reserves. Do we allow the city manager to go back to Measure G when there's more time? Then there was a very short window, so I can understand that. I hear what council members are saying as far as the, let's say, definitions. Is it enhancement? Is it not? Is it restore? And how is it quantified? Because obviously we're all not. So, city manager, is there something that would assist us in understanding that with more clarity? Please.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would just say that as council member articulated, Salazar articulated, if they weren't included in the budget, they are enhancements. I agree with that, and that's why we propose them all as enhancements. Both the restored positions and the new positions in the proposed budget that you received are enhancement requests. And they're enhancements because they were not in the current year budget, right? However, the question was asked, which one of these positions are truly new positions, as in it it is not one of those positions that we froze. And that's what we were providing clarity on, is that we know that in order to avoid layoffs and to balance our budget, we froze a number of positions. And we had that discussion last year. We were freezing the positions, not eliminating the positions. We were literally not saying to the police department, you have X fewer police officers as a authorized head count. We were saying your head count stays the same. However, in this year, we are only funding this many positions. And so there is a terminology, and I understand that we've been sort of tripping over that. I will commit to, in the future, we will provide a definition document of what do we mean by restored, what do we mean by a new position, frozen position, a vacant position. I also think that it's worth, at a later time frame, not when we're at budget time, talking a little bit more about how the personnel budget works, and a vacant position is still a funded position and things like that. And I will actually say one of the things that will help us is one of the enhancement requests that's in the budget for a new HR management system that will manage all of our all of our personnel, and we can give you those reports in a very systematic and easy way of what's vacant on this date, what's a authorized position, what's a frozen position. And so I'll just say I actually agree that they're all enhancement requests, and that's how they were all articulated. I do think if I could support the city council, I'll bring back up this document because we did talk about four items, and I did hear from a number of the council that you're close, and so again, based on where you've landed, it was as far as the ARPA funding. This is the total. That does not include the deputy director in community services, but it does include those 4 positions from Measure G, and utilizing $600,000 to support baseline general fund services, so no longer taking that from Measure G. And the only remaining Measure G item that would not be covered is the $300,000 for the downtown streetscape. And I think the city council can decide to allocate from Measure G, pull from reserves, or a third item, which is to not take any action. And we will go back and further articulate to the Measure G committee the background on this item, and then at a later date, because this is not sort of time sensitive in a 1 month, 2 month thing, we can come back to the city council after having additional conversations with the committee.
Thank you, City Manager, very much. Maybe you can leave that on the screen if you don't mind, just for a minute. Can I go around with my colleagues and just say there's options 1, 2, and 3 as far as the 300,000, so at least we can answer that and give part of our direction on that within our budget. So there were 3 options that the manager articulated on the 300,000. That was to take it out of Measure G, 1, 2, take it out of reserves, and 3 was to allow staff to go back and articulate further with Measure G. Mr. Hamilton.
Since I brought it up, I'm happy to go first. I'm fine with taking no action on that tonight and going back to the committee. I'm partial to just using Measure G, but I'm also respectful of the committee and would want them to weigh in on it with having full information.
And I'll go next. I concur with that statement.
I concur.
Okay, good enough.
Mr. Salazar, and then Mr. Medina.
Yeah, I would just add that I think that if I'm hoping that the city manager could shed some light on that, and they would agree that it's an appropriate use.
Okay, so and I'm sorry, Mr. Salazar, were you good with option 3?
I was concurring with
okay,
the first 2, you and Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. Councilmember Mason?
Sorry, I'm actually looking at the ballot language right now. what's the time difference if we approve the capital reserve? And is that something that would get started any more quickly than going back to the Measure G committee?
So I believe the question was, is there a timing issue with regard to if the council does not appropriate a funding source for the $300,000? I would say if we come back within the first quarter of the fiscal year, there will not be any significant implication on timing. I will say candidly that with the current staffing in the community services department and the significant projects, that this is a project that falls on the director's plate, with not having additional support for the director and the director really helping to shepherd at this point the Centennial Plaza, the Posey Park improvements, the strong governance initiative around the Cultural and Arts Committee, as well as the biggest thing that the director is doing, which is partnering with the Public Works Department to ensure that everything related to the RAC goes off without a hitch. That this project actually is somewhat on the back burner for the next few months, and that doesn't sort of address the other duties of the director as articulated in the memo. And so whether the $300,000 is allocated tonight or in a few months from now, I don't think that it would have a significant impact on the work that would be done under this initiative.
Thank you, City Manager.
I think just for I guess we've gone around, but I still think that for this year, again, since we didn't use the funds last year for the street repair, I'm not opposed to having the conversation with around Measure G and how they can be allotted with the committee. But I do think for this year, I would be okay with the use of the general fund capital reserve and the one-time initiative funds to move this forward and to ensure that the Measure G funds are really focused on what was advertised. Thank you.
Okay, well, I can see that we have a 5-0 not to use Measure G funds, and I am seeing a 1 for the capital reserve, and I'm hearing 4 to have staff go back to the Measure G committee. Am I incorrect in my assessment? Okay, City Manager, you have your direction on that item.
So noted.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're still back to the budget. I think we've cleared up everything on Measure G. We've cleared up everything on ARPA. Granted, some confusion and definitions, and managers already addressed those. City Manager, what do you see that we have left?
So I think based on this document up here and the council's discussions, if a majority of the council is supportive of the allocations of ARPA as proposed on the screen with amended budget, I think we have enough to adopt the operating budget subject to these changes for ARPA, which is including the 4 positions that were to be funded from Measure G funded through ARPA, including the transfer of $600K funded through ARPA, the stormwater of $1 million funded through ARPA, and removing the deputy director position. With that, I think that if there's majority support for that, then that is the operating budget. And I'm saying that because I haven't heard any other discussions, and I know we've had sort of 4+ meetings on the other items on the budget. But the real open items are the ARPA items.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad we're through all of that. I had a few questions on the streets maintenance workers. I sent them into the city manager, kind of like the same idea with the parks workers. What will these workers be doing? And adding in, is any additional time going to be spent on keeping downtown a little cleaner?
Sure. Council Member Medina, yes, as we articulated in one of the prior meetings, I believe it was Deputy Director Dennis Bosch that did mention that there would be restoration of hours spent downtown for power washing and cleaning up downtown. In addition, the employee would be assigned to streets and help out with execution of our street maintenance responsibilities. I do not see Deputy Director Bosch on, but I do see Interim Director Richie on, and Haywan, if you would like to add any additional information, please feel free. Looks like she is being brought into the world.
Yes, thank you, City Manager. Yes.
While Haywan is gathering her thoughts, I do want to mention that in prior years, this position had supported our abandoned waste or illegal dumping pickup. We are going to be launching a pilot program with Recology where they will support abandoned waste and illegal dumping. And so we are not factoring in a portion of the workload for abandoned waste, as was defined before, which is staff would fill tickets from SB Response. That work will be done by Recology. Staff will have to do some of the larger cleanups, but that work will no longer be there.
Okay, so the clarification was provided as to what an additional FTE worker could provide. It would restore 4 hours for San Mateo Avenue downtown area. It was reduced to 2, so it was halved. Could restore 4 hours of a 2-man crew for Excel orders. So those are requests that come in through our community portal, which includes trash issues throughout the city. This was reduced to 2 hours, but it had to be supplemented due to daily complaints. And I would like to also echo that, these are to bring back services that, to a level, the restoration of the positions would, help to provide staffing to hopefully provide, additional restoration of services rather than additional services. These are things that were lost, with the positions being lost, that the time spent in downtown, time spent trash pickup and Excel orders, they either take longer. So when we have work orders for traffic, the traffic work orders that the TSPC has, whether they be new loading zones or painting of red curb, those do generally take longer. And so we could see those happening more quickly, so the ability to respond quicker to and complete street sign repairs as we get those as preventative maintenance, and as well as requests come in, streetlight pole repairs, banners, graffiti requests, removal requests, potholes, traffic work orders, red curb painting. Those do need to be maintained once they're installed. The paint does not last forever, and signs, of course, deteriorate. Traffic markings. So as striping fades, the ability to restore those a little bit more quickly. USA markings, we are required that when we receive USA, we put those underground service alert before someone digs. They need to call and call USA to request those markings so that the person who's digging understands what's below ground. Completing training for new staff members and other requests from the divisions throughout the city.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Director Ritchie. And I know that Dennis is not here currently, but so the downtown work before COVID was a certain level, and then it dropped, and now it's with these 2 additional workers, it's going to be restored to, is that 4 hours a day?
It says restore 4 hours, 2-man crew. So I believe that's looking like 8 hours. So for the 2-man crew for 4 hours.
Okay, yeah, and that's definitely helpful. And I'm satisfied. If that could be provided to us in writing, that would be definitely helpful. It's just Deputy Director Bosch isn't here, but I'm glad to see that restoration is going to be made, and especially in light of Recology doing this test pilot for the garbage pickups. That should free up additional time. So I am satisfied with the answer. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from colleagues on the operational portion of the budget? Councilmember Salazar.
I was looking through the position summary that Councilmember Mason had requested, and I noticed that there was a section in there that is not funded by either of the one-time funds, either Measure G or the ARPA funds. That has other funding sources. They all seem to be covered in something other than what we're bargaining with here, and so I wanted to offer that if we could move forward with those positions as part of the baseline, because these are funded elsewhere and not really dependent on the shifting of funds in the future, that might be a path forward. And that group of positions includes 3 police officers, which might help with the concern the city manager had about delaying the positions. Just an option.
Thank you. City Manager.
Sure. So I can invite the police chief to articulate with regard to the police positions, because I think those 3 positions are the 2 for YouTube and the GIU position. And so Chief Johansson could articulate the service level impact that restoration of those 3 positions would have compared to the other 2 positions that would be funded by ARPA.
And we do always appreciate hearing from Chief Johansson, and I think this council member wasn't questioning that. He was just saying move that forward. But sir, you're with us, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The quick answer to this is that 2 of those positions are the result of a cost recovery agreement that we were able to finally secure with YouTube Google. The nice thing about this position is that it ultimately got articulated as the creation of a 4th beat or service area for the police department rather than specific to the Google YouTube campus, which means that we have 2 fully funded police officers that are then out on the street to respond to all sorts of calls for service, albeit with a focus in that particular area that is sort of fenced in by San Bruno Avenue, Sneath Lane, Cherry, and El Camino Real. So covering kind of that whole area that would be tantamount to a service area is really good for us to get these positions funded, because they're force multipliers. And these are more cops that can work overtime, that can work for cops who are injured or on vacation or in court. So that describes those 2 positions. And those 2 positions actually are, we've sort of already attempted to staff those, because the reality is that they have to be staffed with senior officers, but we have to have junior officers to backfill for those senior officers before they can be placed into those specialty positions. And so we have 2 officers currently attending the academy those are 2 positions that were other vacancies, because we hadn't yet approved this budget, that are being held by positions in the academy instead of being officers out on the street. So it has had an impact on operations throughout the last few months, as we've had to go through backgrounds and hiring to get those 2 officers into a police academy in order to ultimately move officers into that Google YouTube position. The other position is GIU, which is the Countywide Gang Intelligence Unit. And given what was sort of a troubling increase in some gang activity in the community over the last, I would say 12 to 18 months, I think this was a really great opportunity for us to secure a position with the County Gang Intelligence Unit. It brings a lot more attention to the city of San Bruno from the gang task force, as well as from the intelligence unit as a whole, which handles more of the higher end, back end, search warrant related, intelligence driven procedures that are critical to managing a gang problem. And the benefit of securing that position is that $90,000 of it is funded by the county every year, plus the cost of overtime and the cost of a vehicle for that officer. So we do put a little bit of skin in the game in terms of cost there, but essentially it is funded. And so hopefully that provides some description of those three positions and why they do. I appreciate you, Councilmember Salazar, recognizing kind of the difference between those and the hard decisions you guys are faced with making this evening. Those are all essentially funded.
Yeah, great. Sounds like a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And as we all know, too, it's hiring for employees is challenging as well. But we also know, obviously, the extra background and other elements that do with our public safety, especially in our police. So thank you for that explanation. Okay, with that, City Manager, what do you have left that we haven't tackled, or you don't have guidance?
Really, for the City Council, I think is sort of one decision, if you will. I think there has been majority support for everything in the budget, with the exception of there hasn't really been a discussion on is there majority support for the ARPA proposal as presented. And if there is majority support for this, then that is, I think you have majority support to adopt the adopted budget. And so that would be my recommendation to you, mayors, to see if you have majority support for the ARPA proposal, because these are the open items that you've been talking about that you haven't settled on. And if you get through that, then I think you have majority support for the operating budget, knowing that we would have subsequent conversations about long-term issues and strategies and stormwater, et cetera.
Okay, if you could leave that up. And I'd like to, I guess, if it's a yes, just say yes. Or if it's a thumbs up, I can take that as well. I can't see all of you, but Mr. Hamilton, thumbs up. We do have a hand up for Mr. Salazar.
Yeah, and I did want to make one comment. I do agree with most of what I see on this slide, with the exception that on the stormwater line, we filled $1 million hole this year, but there's a very obvious gap in subsequent years. And we balanced this budget at the expense of what we were told was a critical position that would be necessary for the success of the new RAC, which is a $50 million crown jewel for the city. So those two things are, to me, are huge gaps in this budget. And so I really can't support moving forward with the rest of this.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
I'm good. I'm ready to go forward with this. The stormwater is huge, obviously. It's $1 million hole each year. We're approving a one-year budget, and we're going to have to rely on our team to come up with how to fill that $1 million hole each year. And we'll get there. But I'm ready to support this budget.
Councilor Mason? Councilor Mason? Oh, there you go.
Sorry, it took a moment to unmute. I think with the changes that were made, I feel I'd say I feel comfortable with moving forward. I do think, though, that I'd prefer, and I'm hoping the council will support this, but that we not wait until next year to hear what the plans are going to be to continue to fund some of these or all of these positions, actually. I think we all know that we've been short-staffed, we've had a deficit, and it's been at the expense of a lot of our staff. So I just want to say thank you to the staff that worked hard to put this together, but thanks also to the staff that's been working in some cases double duty to make up for people who retired or departments that have been short-staffed. And so with the changes, I don't want to prolong. I know that the hiring process is going to take a little bit of time, but I do want to ask that that we not wait a year to hear about how these are going to be funded next year, that we start having those conversations as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm more comfortable with it, and I think that's what Councilmember Salazar's biggest concern is not waiting, and very concerned on the stormwater because it may not be $1 million. There's also other elements that probably have to be done. It could be more than $1 million potentially, but that's just to keep it afloat per se. That's not to actually move forward on capital improvement and other elements. So I think that's where the council members, rightfully so, concern is. This staff, as long as I've been part of this city or a former employee, it's been a lean city. I've done a surveys to where you can go back and look at 10 years, and between the first year and that 10th year, there's been no increase in staff in various divisions, or it's decreased. Parks is a great example. I'll tell you, I came across a piece of paper about the 17 that used to be there. 17. And so the team really has stepped up. You had folks that stepped up when folks chose to retire that had been here and served this community a long time, so that others would remain, which was just incredible. And then you had those, and then dealing with COVID. So all of them have done a good job. And heck, I was a city employee, but I never had to work through COVID. So they had an extra burden to bear, and they've done it. So it's appreciated. But I think I share with Councilmember Salazar the immediate concern about looking to the future sooner than later, and about we have to begin after this budget is approved, if it is approved, to start planning today for tomorrow, and we can't put it off. With that said, is there any other? You can, if you could, City Manager, stop sharing the screen. Thank you. All right. Any other? This is the resolution. The last one would be approving the operating and the capital improvement program budget. Any action by council?
Through the mayor.
Yes, Mr. Hamilton.
I'd like to move to approve the fiscal year 21-22 operating and fiscal year 21-26 capital improvement program budget with the amendments as we have discussed this evening.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Hamilton, Medina, motion second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Mason?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Very regrettably, I will vote no.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are on conduct of business. Before we begin that, I'm going to ask the city manager, how long do you think this topic might take? Around?
15 minutes or less.
All right. With my colleagues and indulgence, I'd like us to continue. So, conduct of business, City Clerk.
Sorry, I was trying to get myself unmuted.
No problem.
Item 7A, adopt a resolution adopting a list of projects for fiscal year 2021-22 funded by SB1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017.
City Manager.
Yes, I would like to invite Interim Director Haywan Ritchie to provide the presentation.
Yes, thank you, City Manager Grogan. Again, Haywan Ritchie, Interim Public Works Director. Honorable Mayor, City Council members, I would like to share a brief presentation. So, as you are aware, SB1 had passed, also known as RMRA, which stands for, Road Repair Accountability Act of 2017, RMRA, and annually we are required to go to council with our list of projects. So that is the item before you tonight. Oops. The objective is to provide an update on the pavement management program, as well as Senate Bill 1, which is, of course, RMRA, Road Repair Accountability Act of 2017. Agenda, pavement management program, paving activity summary, Senate Bill 1, prioritization method, upcoming reconstruction projects, as well as questions and council action. So just briefly, a payment management program is a tool to help make cost-effective decisions. The program, which is called Street Saver, answers four main questions. What does the city own and maintain? It's a database. What condition is that road in? What repairs are needed and when? And how much is required to maintain or improve streets cost effectively? The status of the city current street network consists of about 89 centerline miles, and the current PCI is 61. So within the past 5 years, the pavement management program, this is from the pavement program itself. It provided pavement maintenance, which is a slurry seal would be a prime example of 3 1/4 centerline miles, approximately 600,000 was spent. Rehabilitated, or that's an overlay with mill and fill or an overlay, about 3 1/2 centerline miles for approximately $4 million, and reconstructed about 0.2 centerline miles, which was done on San Antonio Avenue. About 3 blocks was about approximately $1 million. So as you can see, the cost to provide maintenance on streets that are in good condition, you can cover quite a bit more area for less funding than to provide total street construction. So a bit about Senate Bill 1. Oh, I'm sorry. I do want to mention that as part of the Avenues project that we have been overlaying the streets after the water main replacement, water and sewer main replacement. And so when we factor that additional work that is related to some of those repair projects, the amount of rehabilitation jumps from about 3 1/2 to almost 6 at 5.8. And so I would say about half has been in the east side and half has been about in the west side for the rehabilitation. Reconstruction was solely in the east side of town, and preventive maintenance largely in the western part of town. The Senate Bill 1 is referred to as the Road Repair Accountability Act, again, of 2017, or RMRA. It increased the per gallon fuel excise taxes and vehicle registration fees. It provides additional funding towards maintenance and rehabilitation of local roads. To receive funding for an upcoming year requires that list of proposed projects be funded by SB1, be adopted by resolution at a regular public meeting. So this projected estimate for this fiscal year 21-22 is approximately $800,000. To provide a summary of the SB1 prioritization methodology, the city's established method for prioritizing streets are shown here for SB1. That includes existing pavement condition. So for SB1, it was the worst first consideration. Multifamily residential buildings, so more density. Proximity to gathering places, so these may be areas of gatherings such as schools, parks, public uses, long bus routes for transportation, as well as property density. The streets were selected to provide the highest public benefit. Staff met with council and a subcommittee to provide this information. I would like to say that an overall pavement management program should not focus solely on failed streets. I know that SB1 is focusing on the worst first. And we do need to balance this approach with a preventive maintenance and street rehabilitation program, which the city has. We have an approximately $1 million program for street slurry seal for 21-22, as well as design for the following year street rehabilitation. So we alternate between street slurry seal and overlays. So this SB1 is meant to be funded on those worst streets. So we have other sources of funding in order to provide the preventative maintenance and rehabilitation, and SB1 is for the worst first. So upcoming reconstruction projects, the project for street reconstruction includes a list of streets: Bayshore, Darby, Eastburn, Mills, Montgomery, Parkview, Poplar, and Oxford. Specifically for this year, the two streets are Montgomery and Parkview. These other streets do represent a bit of a backlog on streets that need to be done. We are planning in July to performing the design and working on it aggressively, with anticipated construction in the summer of fall of 22. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Questions from colleagues? Not seeing any questions from colleagues. Let me see if I have any. If there's any members of the public that wish to speak on this item, if you could raise your hand now. And in the meantime, we'll go to Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, thanks for the presentation. Is the schedule available to the public in an easily accessible manner? Because this is a question I think we all get quite often.
I don't believe it's, there's currently a website, and I think that might lend itself to distribution of information, but that is something that we could do.
Thank you.
Seeing no other hands up or other questions from colleagues, any action? This is a resolution.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Salazar.
I'm looking forward to seeing my street get on that list, but I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve this resolution.
I'll second.
Motion Salazar, second in Hamilton. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Mason,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you to staff for everything this evening, all the reports and the work that's gone into the budget. For those that have been on the line too, we also have other staff that have been under the attendees, but they have been there who've been instrumental in putting this budget together with city manager, the director's son, and the team, and all the directors. Let's move on to item 8. Comment from council members. Are there any members of the city council who have comments? Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge sorry, just had a feedback. Okay, I'm good now. I just wanted to acknowledge, last night there was a presentation given to the public on mountain lion safety. It was really, really well executed. I believe well attended, virtually on Zoom, and I just wanted to commend staff. I understand Jennifer Dianos was the key staff member to pull that together, but I know that the team works as a team, and I just wanted to acknowledge everyone's hard work on bringing that important information to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mason.
Thank you. I have 2 announcements. Just one is a thank you to Max over at Atlas Pizza. He had a really nice reopening party that he hosted at Atlas. And by the close of the night, they had counted at least 170 people in attendance. And, you know, Max has been such a partner to the city of San Bruno. At the party was the San Mateo County Silicon Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau representative. The general manager of the Marriott Courtyard was there. The president of the Broadway Burlingame Business Improvement District was there. Max has really gone above and beyond to really highlight our downtown and what it offers. And I just want to make sure that I take the opportunity to thank him and thank everybody who took the time to come. It was such a warm event, and it was so nice to see everybody. We hadn't seen each other in a long time in person. I wanted to also just, in case the members of the public don't know, the American Cancer Society's newest guidelines recommend that colorectal cancer screenings begin at age 45. The American Cancer Society expects an estimated 149,500 cases of colorectal cancer to be diagnosed in the United States this year, with about 52,980 people dying from the disease. This past week, a close family member of mine became part of that 52,980 individuals who lost their battle to cancer, to colon cancer. I'm using this opportunity and voice to educate the public in the hopes that all of you will also educate your own families that screenings are to begin at 45 under the newest guidance, and early screening really does make a difference in outcomes. The timely screening can save your life, and that concludes my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and educating all of us, because I think we all need the reminder, and we are sorry for the loss. Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman Mason, for that. It's a lot easier nowadays. You can get screened, and I personally have done it. It's relatively easy. So go ahead and do that. I just wanted to thank everybody for the amount of work put in this budget. It was very, very difficult, and it was very complicated, and all the acronyms and all that. I think we're in a really good spot considering, and thank you for all the work. Last announcement is for Second Harvest at Bel Air this Thursday. If you are somebody that needs food, it's available. It'll be at Bel Air, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. There's a line. You can register online, in line or online. Let other people know that it's available, and I'll be seeing you there. Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I wanted to follow on what the Vice Mayor said and thank staff for all the work that went into the budget. Even though I voted no ultimately, know that I do understand all the work that went into that and totally respect the professionalism and the commitment that went into that. And my vote definitely does not reflect on the work that went into it. It's just, I'm a slave to my principles. And so I felt I had to vote that way, but not because of my lack of respect for what was done. I also wanted to follow up on Councilmember Hamilton's comments about the mountain lion program. I unfortunately had a conflict last night, and I was wondering if there was a recording of that session available. It'd be nice to go back and see that, and maybe make that available to people that didn't have an opportunity to see it. And finally, seeing our staff in City Hall without the masks and starting to look something like normal, it's definitely a milestone. So I just wanted to congratulate everyone who's there in City Hall for achieving that milestone, and for all the staff that were able to keep everyone safe through the pandemic and get to this point. Definitely great to see you guys there, and looking forward to even more normal going forward.
Thank you. It looked like the fire chief was about out the door. Then he got the camera on him. He had to sit back down. I'm sorry, Councilmember Hamilton. Before I conclude,
very fast. To Councilmember Salazar's comment, the Mountain Lion meeting is on YouTube under the city's account right now. I just checked.
Thank you, sir. I'll look it up.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that last Thursday, in front of City Hall outside, had the San Bruno Chamber Board of Directors installation, and that was attended by some of your council. But they had that done outside. But we participated. I want to thank everyone. Also on Friday, the San Bruno Police Department, along with many departments, that did their torch run for Special Olympics. And I watched as some of our officers in the heat, and as we remember, it was hot last week, running the path to hand off the torch. And then yesterday, congratulations to the Board of Trustees in the San Bruno Park School District for the official groundbreaking at Allen Elementary. Those of you that have gone by obviously have seen activity going on, and so we congratulate them and appreciate that invitation. And I've extended an invitation to them to the Recreation and Aquatic Center groundbreaking that we hope, and now let's not say hope, that we're going to have in August. So with that said, I appreciate staff's time and being here, and all that you've done in preparation for this evening and the budget. With that said, we're going to adjourn tonight to the next regular City Council meeting, which will be held on July 13th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Thank you and good night.